I flew home after landing a huge promotion to surprise my family. Instead, I walked into an engagement party for my ex and my brother, using the venue I booked. When I asked what was going on, my mom said, "Well, you were always too busy for love anyway." A week later, I sent them the invoice. Hi everyone. I'm a 34-year-old woman. Call me Mira. This story has been gnawing at me for the past 2 weeks, and I haven't told anyone the full version yet. Not my coworkers, not my best friend, not even my therapist. But I feel like I need to get it out somewhere, and after reading enough stories on here, I think this is the place. I've always been the kind of person who keeps her head down and works hard. Growing up, I wasn't the loud one in the family. That was my younger brother, Caleb, 31. He was the golden boy, charming, social, loved by everyone. I was the overachiever, the planner, the one who made color-coded flashcards and stayed up until midnight rewriting essays because good enough just wasn't in my vocabulary. We were never exactly close, but we weren't distant either. I helped him with homework. He teased me about my coffee addiction, that kind of thing. We had the usual sibling moments, inside jokes, occasional arguments, birthdays and holidays spent under the same roof. But there was always a slight imbalance in how we were treated. My parents, especially my mom, catered to Caleb in ways that I didn't always understand. If he forgot to do a chore, it was because he had a lot on his mind. If I forgot, I was losing focus. If he didn't call, it was because he was independent. If I didn't call, it was disappointing. Still, I chalked it up to sibling dynamics. I focused on school, then college, then law school. I moved to the city, got into corporate law, and poured everything I had into building my career. I won't lie. I've missed things. Birthdays, dinners, even a wedding or two. It wasn't because I didn't care. I just kept telling myself there would be time later, that I could always make it up to them. Earlier this year, I landed the biggest promotion of my life. It had been in the works for months, but when it finally happened, it still hit me like a wave. I was named junior partner at my firm, something that typically takes people decades to reach. It came with a huge salary bump, new responsibilities, and a very, very different view from my office window. The first person I called was my mentor. The second was my best friend. The third was no one. I thought about calling my mom or dad, but I hesitated. They hadn't exactly been interested in my work lately. During our last call, when I mentioned the promotion might be happening, Mom changed the subject almost immediately. Something about Caleb's new project with his landscaping business. So I decided instead to surprise them. It felt like the right thing to do, something spontaneous and joyful. I hadn't been home in nearly a year, not since last summer. Between my caseload and the travel required, time had just gotten away from me. So I booked a flight for the weekend and started putting together a small dinner to share the news. There's a charming little venue just outside of town, an old converted greenhouse with exposed wood beams and hanging lights. I'd been to a wedding there years ago and remembered how warm and inviting it was. I reached out, and by some stroke of luck, they had a Saturday evening slot open 2 weeks out. I booked it immediately, paid in full, and started making arrangements for catering and a private chef. My plan was simple: fly in Saturday afternoon, head to the venue early to check in, and then welcome everyone at 6 p.m. for what they'd assume was just a nice family dinner. At some point during dessert, I'd tell them the real reason I brought everyone together. I even had custom cards printed with the promotion announcement and little thank you notes for their support. It was the first time in a long while that I felt excited to be doing something for myself and for my family. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not even my cousin Isla, who usually knew everything before it happened. I wanted it to be a real surprise. My heart was pounding just imagining the look on my dad's face when he saw me walk in, or hearing Mom's laugh when I handed her the card with the promotion news inside. It felt good, right? But then the plane landed, and everything began to unravel. When I arrived at the venue, it was about 5:15 p.m. I had planned to get there a little early, just to go over final details with the coordinator and maybe sneak in a quick change of clothes in the restroom. I still had my suitcase with me, nothing fancy, just to carry on with a clean blouse, a pair of flats, and the promotion cards tucked inside. The moment the car pulled up to the curb, I noticed something was off. There were way more people outside than I had expected. I counted at least 30 milling around the entrance, chatting in small groups. A few were dressed semi-formally. One woman even had a little fascinator pinned in her hair. Not typical attire for a casual family dinner. Then I saw the floral arch. It was standing just off to the side of the entrance, covered in pink and cream roses. And under it, Two people were posing for photos while a small crowd clapped and snapped pictures. I felt like I had walked into someone else's celebration. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd gotten the time or date wrong. I pulled up the email confirmation on my phone, double-checked the name of the venue. Everything matched. It was supposed to be my event. So why were there guests already here? Why were there decorations I hadn't ordered? And why, when I stepped through the front doors, did everyone look surprised to see me? The music playing wasn't the playlist I had submitted. There was a buffet table set up along the east wall. Someone had brought in cupcakes with gold lettering. The lights were dimmed, and fairy lights had been strung around the beams in a way I hadn't approved. Then, right in front of me, hanging from the rafters, was a banner. Caleb and Lila. She said yes. I stared at it for what felt like minutes, but was probably just a few seconds. Lila. That name hit me like a thud in my chest. Lila wasn't just anyone. Lila was my ex-girlfriend. My partner of 5 years. The woman I had shared an apartment with, made vacation plans with, talked about adopting a dog with. The one who, almost 2 years ago, told me through tears that she needed space to find herself. She moved out 6 weeks later. We hadn't spoken since. And now she was here, wearing a white dress, next to my brother, beneath a banner that announced they were engaged. And every single member of my family was in the room, holding drinks and smiling. No one had told me. No one had even thought to tell me. I felt someone touch my arm gently. I turned and saw my mom. She looked delighted, absolutely glowing, like she'd just gotten everything she ever wanted. "Mira, you made it," she said, as though this were a completely normal day. "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Caleb was worried you wouldn't show." I tried to form words, but all that came out was a quiet, "What is this?" She tilted her head, as though I was asking why the sky was blue. "Sweetheart, it's Caleb and Lila's engagement party. Isn't it lovely?" I took a step back. My throat was dry. "Engagement party? This is the venue I booked." She blinked. "Oh, right. Well, we weren't sure you were coming, and Lila had seen the space. She just loved it, and since it was already paid for, we figured, why not?" I just stood there, blinking, trying to process what I just heard. "You figured?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You just used the venue I paid for? Without asking me?" Mom gave me that practice smile, the one that said, "Don't be silly. I'm doing you a favor. You've been so busy, Mira. Always chasing work." Caleb and Lila needed the space, and it seemed a shame to waste it. I wanted to say something, anything, that would make this make sense. But it didn't. Instead, I felt a sudden pressure in my chest, like I was being squeezed tighter and tighter. I looked toward Caleb, who had been standing quietly just behind Lila, and for the first time I really saw him. His smile was strained, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, voice shaking just enough to betray my anger. Caleb looked down, cleared his throat, and mumbled, "It just happened fast, Mira. I didn't want to hurt you." I blinked. "Hurt me? By what? Planning a party with my ex? In the venue I booked for us?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to." Before he could finish, my mom cut in, her tone suddenly sharp. "Mira, darling, you've been so caught up in your job, you barely notice what's going on around you. Caleb and Lila deserve happiness, and if you can't support that, well, that's on you." It felt like a slap. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "You could have called. Even a text. Something. I'm not asking for permission, just basic respect." Mom shook her head slowly. "Respect? You don't understand family, Mira. You think because you've been away and busy, you're somehow the only one who matters. But Caleb is family too. He deserves a celebration, just like anyone." Lila was watching me, that perfect smile still in place. She looked calm, serene, like this whole scene was something she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head. I looked around the room. Faces I recognized but couldn't connect with right now. Friends of Caleb's, maybe. People who had been looped in on this secret celebration. And me, the outsider. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from the venue manager. "Just confirming. Your payment cleared last week for Saturday's booking. Everything's set for 50 guests, including bar and catering. Let me know if you want the itemized invoice." That's when it hit me. The whole event was on me. The catering, the decorations, the entire bill. And they had the nerve to throw this party, using my resources, without so much as a heads up. I turned back to my mom. I covered this whole event. The venue, the catering, the staff. All of it. You're throwing a party on my dime." Her face tightened for a moment before she forced a polite laugh. "Oh, Mira, don't be ridiculous. Caleb would never let you pay for a thing. We just handled the details while you were away. It's just easier that way. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed hard and said quietly, I'm leaving. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my suitcase from the coat check and turned toward the door. Before I reached it, Caleb stepped in front of me. You don't have to do this, he said, voice low but firm. We can work something out. I looked him in the eye, searching for any trace of the brother I once knew, the one who used to sit by the fireplace with me during storms, who stayed up late to help me memorize lines for school plays. But all I saw was someone who'd chosen sides a long time ago. No, Caleb, I said, steady now. You made your choice. I'm done being the background character in your story. I pushed past him, out the door, and into the cool evening air. As I stood outside, my phone lit up again. Another message from Mom. Maybe you should think about what's really important, Mira. Family isn't just about work and ambition. I let the phone slip into my pocket. That night, in my hotel room, I went over every detail. I looked through my emails, payment confirmations, contracts. The venue, catering, bar staff, all paid for by me. And then I drafted an email, an invoice, for every last dollar. Because if they wanted to use what I'd paid for, they could pay me back. But I knew that would only make things worse. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about loyalty. It was about being seen. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. Not angry, not sad, just drained. My head buzzed with every interaction from the night before, every word, every look. I couldn't shake the image of that banner or the way my mom's smile had turned so quickly from warm to cold. I knew I had to confront this, but not in person. Not yet. First, I sat down with my laptop and pulled up every receipt and confirmation email connected to the event. There were dozens: the venue rental, catering deposits, the bartenders, the florists, even the valet service. All paid weeks ago from my personal account. The total? Over $12,000. I stared at the number longer than I care to admit. But what choice did I have? If my family was going to hijack my surprise and use my resources without a word, I wasn't about to let them walk away without accountability. So I drafted a formal invoice. Professional, polite, clear. I itemized every cost line by line. The venue fee, $4,200. Catering, $5,000. Bartender and service staff, $1,800. Decorations, $1,000. And so on. I attached the full breakdown to an email addressed to my mother and Caleb. The subject line was simple: reimbursement for event expenses. In the body, I wrote, Dear Mom and Caleb, I hope this finds you well. As you know, the venue and all associated services for Saturday's event were booked and paid for in full under my name and account. Given that the event was repurposed for Caleb and Lila's engagement party without prior notice or consent, I have attached a detailed invoice reflecting the full cost incurred. I trust you will arrange for payment by the 15th of this month. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Best, Mira, I sent it. Then I waited. What happened next surprised me, but maybe it shouldn't have. The reply didn't come from Mom. It came from Caleb. His email was curt and defensive. Mira, I don't know why you're making a big deal out of this. We're family. We all contribute in our own way. Mom and Dad have covered plenty for you over the years. This was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, you're turning it into a financial issue. It's disappointing. I stared at the screen, rereading the words. Disappointing. It felt like a punch to the gut. But I wasn't done. I responded carefully, not letting my frustration show. Caleb, I've never expected family to cover for me financially. That's not why I sent the invoice. It's about respect and communication. I booked the venue and paid for it months ago with the intention of hosting a family celebration. To have that turned into an engagement party for you and Lila, without a single call or text, feels like a betrayal. If this were any other event, I would have gladly stepped back. But the lack of honesty is what hurts most. That email was sent early Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, the atmosphere back home had shifted noticeably. My cousin Isla called me that afternoon, voice low and cautious. Hey, Mira, are you okay? I heard what happened. I told her as much as I could without breaking down. She sighed. Mom's been on edge. Says you're being difficult and ungrateful. Caleb's friends have been asking questions. The family split. I wasn't surprised. Isla's words confirmed what I'd been feeling all along. My family wasn't just upset about the money. They were angry because I wasn't playing along, because I was standing up, because I was refusing to be erased. That evening, I received another email from Mom. Her tone was icy, sharp as a winter wind. "Mira, perhaps it's time to reconsider your priorities. Your relentless focus on your career has distanced you from those who love you. Caleb and Lila's happiness should be celebrated, not hindered. We will not be forwarding payment for an event that was never yours to claim. Family isn't about transactions." I sat back in my chair, stunned by the cruelty hidden behind those carefully chosen words. Family isn't about transactions? So, I wasn't family anymore? Lila's smile in the photos suddenly felt like a twisted joke. I thought back to every holiday I had missed, every late night at the office, every time I put their needs before mine. And now, after years of sacrifice, I was being discarded. But I'm not one to back down, because family might be about loyalty for them. But for me, it's about respect. And they had crossed a line. After I read my mom's email, something inside me shifted. I'd always been the good daughter, quiet, hardworking, the one who never caused waves. But now, it was clear they didn't see me as that anymore. I was just the convenient ATM, the person they could take for granted until I refused to be. I knew if I tried to talk it out with them, I'd just get more lectures about priorities and family loyalty. No, this needed a different approach. The first step was gathering evidence. I printed every email, every payment confirmation, every message I had from the venue. I made a folder on my computer labeled Family Event. I saved screenshots of Caleb and Lila's engagement party photos from their social media, the guest lists, the invitations sent out. I even got hold of the venue's contract. They had signed nothing new after I booked it, which meant legally, the whole event was on me. I reached out to the venue manager one evening and explained the situation without giving too much away. She was sympathetic and said that since the payment had cleared in my name and the contract hadn't been amended, they were technically obligated to bill me for any damages or additional costs. That was my leverage. I spent the next few days quietly talking to a few people I trusted back home, people who hadn't taken sides yet. I told them the story in careful doses, emphasizing how I'd been blindsided and how my family had steamrolled over me. The way my parents and Caleb had pulled a stunt like this, right under my nose, shocked some of them. One of those people was Isla, my cousin. She'd been reluctant at first, but when I explained that I planned to hold them accountable, she agreed to help me subtly. She promised to keep me updated on the family gossip and what they were saying behind my back. As the days went by, the tension in our group of mutual friends and relatives became palpable. I could tell my family was starting to feel the heat, though they probably had no idea where it was coming from. Then, I decided it was time to hit closer to home. I sent an official letter to my parents and Caleb, this time through certified mail. It was a formal notice outlining the costs associated with the event, the contract terms, and a deadline for repayment. I reminded them of the legal responsibility they bore for misusing the venue I had booked and paid for. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't trying to rebuild bridges, at least, not yet. I was demanding respect. And if they wanted to keep treating me like I was invisible, they'd have to face the consequences. That letter shook them. I started getting cold responses from my dad, who had remained silent until now. He called me one morning, voice clipped and defensive. "Mira, this is family business. You don't need to drag lawyers into it. We'll sort it out." I shook my head. "Dad, you don't get it. You used what I paid for without telling me. That's not family business. That's theft." There was a long pause. Then he hung up. I knew I had their attention. But more than that, I knew I was waking a sleeping giant. Because beneath the surface, my family had built their entire identity around control of money, of reputation, of how everyone was supposed to behave. And me? I was the wild card. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. Over the next week, I made a plan to ensure my family felt the full weight of their entitlement. Not through loud confrontations or dramatic scenes, but through calculated moves that hit exactly where it hurt the most: their pride, their social standing, their image in the community. Step 1. I contacted a local business bureau and filed a complaint against the event organizers for mismanagement of my booking. The venue had to respond publicly, which meant anyone in town who'd been curious about the party started hearing whispers about a dispute. Step 2. I quietly spread word among some key mutual friends and professional contacts about how my family had taken advantage of me. The message was clear but subtle. If they were willing to disrespect their own, what could others expect? Step 3 was the hardest, deciding whether to confront Lila directly. She was part of this, willingly or not. I knew she had played a role in encouraging Caleb to take over the venue. But I also wondered if she was fully aware of what she was stepping into. But I held back. Because revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the other side understands exactly what they lost. And I was just getting started. It didn't take long for the first ripple of my quiet campaign to reach home. A few days after filing the complaint with the Business Bureau, I noticed a shift in the way my family communicated with me. The emails became colder, the phone calls more guarded. I knew they were trying to figure out what I was doing without revealing their own anxiety. Then, the subtle jab started. Mom sent me a message, short and clipped. "This isn't how we resolve things, Mira. You're making enemies where none existed." I didn't respond. Caleb was worse. One afternoon, he called me out of the blue, voice stiff. "Look, maybe you should drop this. It's embarrassing for everyone." I could almost hear the forced calm in his tone. "Embarrassing?" I repeated. "You threw my surprise party, used my venue, and didn't tell me. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed." He scoffed. "You're being ridiculous. Everyone here thinks you're overreacting." I bit back the urge to snap back and instead asked calmly, "Who is everyone, Caleb?" Because from what I'm hearing, a lot of people aren't so sure. That was enough to make him hang up. The truth was, my little campaign was working. People were whispering, questioning, taking sides. My family's carefully maintained reputation as the perfect, close-knit group was starting to crack. And my parents? They were losing control. One evening, my dad called again, this time his voice softer, almost pleading. "Mira, can we please talk? Face to face." I hesitated. After everything, after the way they dismissed me, was I ready to let them back in? But I agreed. Because sometimes, you have to show your hand before you can win the game. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between their house and mine. When I arrived, my parents were already there. Mom's expression was guarded. Dad looked tired. The conversation started stiffly, with them trying to steer it toward old memories and family traditions. But I cut through all that. "I didn't come here to reminisce," I said. "I came because you used me. My money, my plans, my surprise. And you didn't even tell me." Mom's eyes narrowed. "We did what we thought was best. You've been so distant. You don't seem to want family anymore." "That's not true," I replied. "I want respect. I want honesty." "Is that too much to ask?" Dad sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe we all made mistakes. But dragging this out isn't healthy." I looked them both in the eye. "It's not about dragging it out. It's about making sure you understand you can't treat me like I'm invisible." There was silence. And then Mom leaned in, voice low but sharp. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your job, you'd be here for us." That cut deeper than any insult. Because underneath the anger was something I recognized, resentment. They resented that I'd chosen my career over the family drama they thrived on. But I didn't back down. I've worked hard for what I have. If you want to be part of my life, you need to start respecting that. Dad shook his head slowly. "You're making this about money and pride, not family." I stood up, ready to leave. "No, Dad. I'm making this about respect. And if that's too much, maybe family is exactly what it isn't for us." I walked out before either of them could say another word. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I knew this wasn't the end, far from it. The family I'd known was fracturing, and I was right in the middle. After that tense meeting, I knew things would never go back to the way they were. The cracks had turned into chasms. My family had shown their true colors, and I was done pretending otherwise. I doubled down on my stance. The invoice remained unpaid, and I made it clear through emails and messages that I wasn't interested in negotiating or sweeping this under the rug. If they wanted my support, they would need to start by respecting me, and that started with paying for the damage they caused. Slowly but surely, the pressure began to tell. Several mutual acquaintances who had once admired my family's close-knit image now whispered about the scandal quietly. Invitations to gatherings stopped coming. My calls and messages went unanswered more and more. One weekend, I heard through Isla that my parents had started asking around about my whereabouts, but without any real intention of reaching out. Caleb stopped responding altogether. It stung, but I reminded myself that their silence was their choice. Months passed. I focused on my career, my own circle of friends, and rebuilding my life free from the shadows of their entitlement and cruelty. I rented a small place farther from my hometown, where no one had to remind me who I was or what I deserved. Occasionally, I thought about the family I'd lost, not because I wanted to reconcile, but to remind myself how far I'd come. One day, I received a formal payment confirmation from my parents' account. They'd finally sent the money for the invoice, late, begrudging, and without a word of apology. That was the moment I realized I didn't need their acknowledgement. Their payment was simply a transaction to clear the debt, not a bridge to healing. I replied with a short message, "Payment received. This settles our business. For my peace of mind, I'm choosing to move forward without further contact. I wish you well. No forgiveness. No reopening wounds. Just closure. And freedom. Because sometimes, the greatest act of self-respect is knowing when to walk away." That's how it ended. I cut ties with the people who refused to see my worth. And I finally learned that family isn't about blood or tradition. It's about respect, loyalty, and love earned, not demanded. And as for me, I'm finally building a life where I am seen, valued, and above all, free. There's always that one family member who manages to suck the air out of the room the moment they open their mouth. For me, that person is my older brother, Connor. I'm Austin, 29, and I've spent the better part of my adult life trying to distance myself from his shadow. Partly because everyone kept telling me I was lucky to have such a successful brother, and partly because I knew better. On paper, Connor looked like the golden child, business degree, flashy car, loud confidence. But I knew the reality was a lot messier, and underneath the shiny LinkedIn profile was a guy playing house in a crumbling apartment, lying to everyone, including himself. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to say this, but Christmas with my family feels more like a performance than a celebration. Mom makes the same 3 casseroles she's been making since 2006. Dad pretends to understand TikTok to bond with my younger cousins, and Connor always finds a way to turn every story back to himself. This year was no different, except for one thing. I came in knowing something he didn't. And that knowledge, quiet and patient, was the only reason I didn't walk out the second he opened his mouth. Let me back up a little. I work in UX design, nothing glamorous, but it pays well, and I like the projects. I keep a pretty low profile, never been one to brag about what I do or what I've accomplished. Which is probably why, in our family, it's easy for Connor to play the role of the successful one, while I'm cast as the guy who never quite figured it out. It's not that my parents are cruel or anything. They're just impressionable. Connor talks fast, dresses sharp, and always seems to have some big project in the works, so they eat it up. Meanwhile, I show up in jeans and a hoodie and quietly bring the wine. And somehow I'm the one who needs career advice. Our relationship has always been a little strained. Growing up, Connor was the classic older brother, competitive, dismissive, and always one step ahead. He was the kid who turned in my homework late just to mess with me, then told Mom I must have forgotten it. He once convinced a teacher I cheated on a group project because he wanted to work with someone else. He's charming when he wants to be, which means he gets away with a lot. But charm fades when you spend your whole life burning bridges. And recently, one of those bridges happened to lead straight back to me. About a year ago, I reconnected with my old college roommate, Marco. Great guy, studied architecture while I was drowning in design theory. We shared a tiny off-campus apartment for 2 years, and while we lost touch for a while after graduation, we recently started grabbing coffee again every few months. Turns out, Marco owns a few properties now, small-time landlord stuff, nothing sketchy, and surprise, surprise, one of his tenants was none other than my brother, Connor. At first, I didn't say anything. I figured it was a coincidence, and maybe Connor had finally gotten his act together. But every time Marco brought up this nightmare tenant who always has excuses, dodges repairs, and plays loud music until 3 a.m., I had a sinking feeling. Then he mentioned the tenant's name, and I had to choke on my latte. Apparently, Connor had no idea Marco and I even knew each other, let alone had history, which made things interesting. Because Marco, being the decent guy he is, didn't want to evict someone over minor annoyances, but the list was getting longer. Unpaid rent, unauthorized guests, a dog he wasn't supposed to have. Marco was frustrated, but still giving him the benefit of the doubt. I told him to keep me out of it. I didn't want to get involved in my brother's mess. At least, not unless I had to. And then came Christmas. We do it at my parents' house every year. There's no snow. This is Southern California. But Mom still insists on putting on that fireplace video on the TV like it'll make the house feel cozier. I showed up with a bottle of wine, wearing my usual low-effort flannel, and tried to blend into the corner like always. My cousins were already there, scrolling on their phones, and Dad gave me a distracted, "Hey, kiddo," before going back to carving the ham. Connor, naturally, arrived late and loud, wearing a blazer over a turtleneck like he was about to give a TED Talk. He greeted everyone with hugs and backslaps and "Merry Christmas, fam," before plopping himself at the head of the table like a king returning from battle. I kept quiet for most of the meal. Listened to Connor talk about his latest client, some vague real estate gig he was trying to spin as a startup. Mom beamed every time he spoke, asking follow-ups like she was interviewing him for a magazine. Dad nodded along like he understood every word. Nobody asked me about work, but I didn't mind. I was used to it. It wasn't until dessert that things took a turn. The table was full: apple pie, gingerbread, that weird Jell-O salad my aunt still insists on making. And I was mid-bite when Connor leaned back in his chair, looked around the room, and said, "You know, it's kind of funny. Everyone always said we were the smart kids. But you look around, and I guess not everyone lives up to that potential." I froze. At first, I thought he was making some general comment. But then he looked directly at me. Smirked. "I mean, Austin's got a degree and all, but not much to show for it, huh?" The room went quiet. A few awkward chuckles. Mom gave a nervous Connor, like maybe she thought he was joking. But he wasn't. He was smiling. That smug, self-satisfied look he'd been wearing since high school, like he just dunked on someone and wanted the world to know. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, but I forced a smile. Just nodded. "Yeah," I said softly. "Guess some of us just peak early." He laughed. "Hey, no shame in being average. Someone's got to be the baseline, right?" It stung more than I expected. I'd learned to tune Connor out over the years, but something about the way he said it, so casual, so public, made it harder to swallow. I looked around the table. No one said anything. Not Dad. Not my cousins. Just silence and shifting glances. I realized, in that moment, that they all kind of believed him. Maybe they always had. And that's when I pulled out my phone. I didn't say a word. Just opened a message thread with Marco and typed, "Hey, just curious. Did Connor ever pay that November rent?" Marco responded within seconds, "Nope. And now there's a leak in the ceiling from his unit. Caught him hosting an Airbnb guest again too." "What?" I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back, "Can you send me a list of all the violations you've got documented?" He replied with a PDF. I stared at that PDF from Marco like it was a grenade waiting for me to pull the pin. I hadn't planned on using it. Not tonight. Not on Christmas. But something about the way Connor humiliated me at the dinner table, so smug, so confident, flicked a switch I didn't even realize was still wired. I didn't say anything. Just saved the file. Locked my phone. Took another bite of pie. But I wasn't tasting anything anymore. My mind was buzzing. The rest of the night passed in that awkward, plastic smile kind of way. Connor kept holding court like he was the guest of honor instead of just the loudest guy in the room. I caught my mom giving me a few worried glances, but she didn't say anything. She never does. I stayed quiet because I was used to it. The being overlooked, the snide remarks, the silent expectation that I'd just brush it off and keep the peace. But that night was different. Something had cracked. The next morning, I woke up with that PDF still on my mind. I stared at it again over coffee. The list of violations was even longer than I remembered. Multiple months of partial rent, documented parties, unapproved pets, unauthorized subletting, and one line that stood out like a siren. Threatened to sue when warned of eviction. I didn't text Marco. Not yet. Instead, I tried to focus on the rest of the holidays. We still had a few more days before everyone flew back to their corners of the country. And I'll be honest, I told myself I wouldn't do anything, that it wasn't worth the fallout. But then Connor opened his mouth again. It started subtle. The next day, we were all in the living room, watching some half-baked Netflix holiday movie while Mom passed around leftover cookies. My younger cousin Evan was asking me about UX design. He's just starting college, super curious, and I was walking him through some basic principles of interface psychology when Connor piped up from across the room. "You really gonna bore the kid to death with button layouts and scroll bars?" I laughed it off. So did Evan. But Connor kept going. "I mean, come on. No offense, Austin, but if I wanted a tutorial on making apps no one uses, I'd just Google it." The room went quiet again. Evan gave me a sheepish look. "It's cool. I'm actually into it." Connor cut him off. "Nah, man. Don't waste your time. Learn something that'll actually make you money." And again, just like that, everyone froze. My mom gave him a half-hearted "Connor, be nice," but he waved her off like he was doing me a favor. The worst part? I didn't say anything. I just sat there, heart pounding, feeling like I was 16 again and being mocked for choosing art electives over debate team. Later that night, while most of the family was outside watching my little cousins try to light sparklers in the cold, I caught Connor alone in the kitchen, pouring himself a drink. I walked in, not planning anything, just needing to say something. "You know," I said quietly, "you don't have to talk to me like that." He didn't even turn around. "Like what?" "Like I'm a joke." He laughed. "Come on, man. Don't be so sensitive. It's just brotherly banter. Feels a lot more like targeted humiliation." Finally, he looked at me, smirked. "If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe that says more about you than me." And then he walked past me like I wasn't even there. That was the moment I knew I was done. The rest of the visit was just Connor being Connor. At brunch, he told my aunt I was between jobs, even though I've been at the same company for 3 years. At game night, he made a crack about me living alone in a studio with 0 prospects, when I actually own my place and have more savings than he probably realizes. Every time he spoke, it was like he was trying to shrink me down, word by word. But the real breaking point came on the final night. We were all packed into the living room again. Mom had made hot cocoa. Dad was telling one of his long-winded stories about how he used to hitchhike to college in the 70s. Connor was scrolling on his phone, half listening, when my mom said something that made my jaw clench. She looked over at Connor and said, "You know, I've been meaning to talk to you about that rental situation. Austin mentioned your landlord's been difficult." Connor raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "You told her that?" I blinked. "No, I didn't say anything." He scoffed. "Then how would she know?" I turned to Mom. "Where did you hear that?" She looked confused. "Connor mentioned it at dinner a few nights ago. Something about your friend, Marco, is it, harassing him over repairs?" My blood went cold. Connor leaned back with a lazy grin. "Yeah, real piece of work, that guy. Pretends he's this cool landlord, but never fixes anything. I've had to pay out of pocket to get my own stuff fixed." That was a lie. A bold, bald-faced lie. I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. I told him I'd sue if he didn't shape up. I'm not paying full rent to live in a dump. He tried to evict me last month over some nonsense violation. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. And that's when Connor's eyes narrowed. "What?" he said cold. "Just funny," I replied. "The version you're telling is not what Marco's been documenting." He sat up straighter. "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out my phone, opened the PDF, flipped the screen around, and held it up. "This," I said. Everyone leaned in. Connor's face shifted from arrogant to defensive in seconds. "You've been spying on me?" "No. Marco and I are friends. Have been for years. You're the one who decided to rent from someone without realizing he and I were roommates." Mom was already starting to look uncomfortable. "Austin, maybe this isn't the time." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You wanted to know about his landlord? Here's your answer. Unpaid rent. Unauthorized pets. Subletting. Threats of legal action. You name it." Connor stood up. "You had no right." "I didn't do anything," I said, still holding the phone. "But you did. You've been lying to everyone. About your situation. About your success. About me." His voice got louder. "Oh, get off your high horse. You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "But it proves I'm not the failure you keep painting me as." The room was dead silent. And then he did something I didn't expect. He looked right at Mom and Dad and said, "You're really gonna let him pull this petty crap? He's just jealous because I've always been the one who actually mattered." That word, mattered, hit me like a slap. I looked at my parents, at my cousins, at everyone who had always quietly let Connor dominate every room, every story, every dinner. And then I did something I'd been holding off for far too long. I opened my messages, tapped Marco's name, typed a single sentence, send the formal notice. Connor's phone buzzed 5 seconds later. He looked down, read it, went pale. Then, slowly, he looked up at me. "What did you do?" After the yelling, after the accusations, after Connor's voice cracked with rage and his carefully polished mask slipped right off his face, everyone just stood there, stunned, silent, caught between the wreckage of years of unspoken tension and the shock of seeing the successful son unravel like a pulled thread. My parents looked dazed. Mom clutched her mug like it might steady her, eyes flicking between Connor and me, as if searching for some familiar version of her sons that wasn't there anymore. Dad opened his mouth once or twice, but nothing came out. My aunt quietly ushered the younger cousins upstairs, whispering something about letting the adults talk. though we both knew what that really meant was this is ugly, and I don't want to deal with it. Connor stormed out that night, not just from the house, but from the whole scene, tires screeching on the wet street as he peeled away, phone in hand, already calling someone, his girlfriend maybe, or a lawyer, or just someone who'd tell him what he wanted to hear. He didn't even grab his stuff. The silence after he left was worse than the shouting. No one looked at me. No one said, "Good job," or "You were right." They just dispersed, like my truth had made the air too heavy to breathe. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, the one with the old posters still taped to the wall and a drawer full of forgotten tech cords, and I stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling I used to stare at after Connor made me cry during arguments, or after another birthday where he got a big gift and I got socks. And I wondered if maybe I'd made a mistake. Not because I was wrong, but because, even after all this time, a part of me still wanted their approval. And what I got instead was a living room full of silence and a family splintered down the middle. The next morning, no one brought it up. Not even a whisper. I came downstairs to the smell of burnt toast and the clink of silverware on plates. Mom was at the sink, humming, actually humming, like she could just rewind the last 12 hours and pretend it never happened. Dad read the paper like a man hiding behind ink and headlines. My aunt made a joke about the weather. I sat down and ate quietly, waiting for someone to break the script. No one did. When I left that day, my mom hugged me tightly, like she was trying to hold on to a version of me she could understand. "You're a good person, Austin," she said softly, not quite looking me in the eyes. "I know you were just trying to help." I smiled politely and didn't ask her who she thought I was helping. Back in my apartment, it felt like winter had followed me home. I kept waiting for the guilt to kick in, the kind that always showed up when I did something Connor didn't like. But it didn't come. Not this time. What came instead was silence and peace. No more comparing myself to his fake milestones. No more biting my tongue. Just a strange, unfamiliar quiet that settled over my small apartment like a blanket. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was something. I spent New Year's Eve alone, and for once, I didn't mind. While the world screamed through fireworks and champagne, I sat on my balcony with a whiskey and a notebook. Not my laptop, just pen and paper. I hadn't journaled in years, but something about seeing Connor fall apart made me want to reassemble myself, piece by piece. So I wrote about how small I'd let myself feel, about how I downplayed every success to avoid making waves, about how tired I was of making myself digest my own dignity just to keep the family peace. And I made a promise, not a resolution, just a quiet contract with myself, that I was done performing. I wasn't going to be the shadow anymore. I wasn't going to keep trimming myself down to make other people comfortable. I was going to take up space. The first thing I did was redesign my portfolio. Not because I needed a new job, I liked mine, but because I realized I'd been hiding behind generic bios and safe designs. I added more of my personality, showcased passion projects I used to be embarrassed by, and submitted it to a UX design award program I'd been too nervous to enter before. I didn't expect to win. I just wanted to take the swing. Then I reached out to Marco. I told him I hoped everything went smoothly with the formal notice. He said it did. Connor tried to threaten legal action, but once Marco forwarded the lease terms and violation documents, he went quiet. Apparently, he was trying to find a new place and fast. I told Marco I appreciated him handling it professionally. He replied, "You did the right thing." And hey, karma's patient, but thorough. By February, something had shifted in me. I started saying yes more. To coffee with old friends. To side projects I used to turn down because I didn't think I was good enough. To hiking trails I'd bookmarked but never tried. I stopped waiting for someone to notice me and started noticing myself. It was strange at first, like meeting a version of me that had been waiting behind a locked door for years. But every time I stood up straighter, every time I took a risk or drew a boundary, that version stepped a little closer. Work started picking up too. A manager I admired invited me to collaborate on a major app redesign for a well-known wellness brand. It was the kind of project people fight to get on, and he picked me because, in his words, "You've got the kind of perspective this needs." A year ago, I would have second-guessed myself. Spent days convincing myself he made a mistake. But now I just said, I'd love to. I still hadn't heard from Connor. Not a text, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive post online. Part of me expected him to reach out. maybe with an apology, though that felt laughable, or at least a demand to fix what I broke. But the silence stretched on, and I started realizing it wasn't just distance. It was disinterest, not just on his end, on mine. I didn't miss him. I missed the idea of a brother I never really had. And that was the part that hurt most. Because for years, I kept hoping he'd change. That one day he'd pull me aside, admit he was harsh because he was insecure, or afraid, or just didn't know how to be a good brother. I wanted to believe there was something redeemable under the smirk. But some people don't want redemption. They want control. And once they lose it, they don't come back with grace. Still, my parents kept calling. Every few days, Mom would check in, ask how work was going, avoid saying his name, but let it hang in the air like an unspoken ghost. Dad said even less, but he sent me a cryptic text in March. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good, but it still matters. I didn't reply, because by then, I didn't need to be told. I already knew. By April, I got word that I was shortlisted for the UX award. They invited me to a small industry event in New York, and I almost turned it down. Travel, hotels, crowds. But then I remembered who I used to be. And I booked the ticket. I bought a new blazer. I stood in a room full of strangers and introduced myself without apology. I didn't win, but I met a recruiter from a company I'd always admired. We grabbed drinks, talked about design philosophy, about storytelling through interface. He asked if I'd ever considered working internationally. Said they were opening a satellite office in Amsterdam and looking for senior leads. I laughed. That's a long way from LA. He smiled. Sometimes distance gives you perspective. That night, I walked through the city alone, cold wind biting at my face, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Connor. Not at my parents. Not even at myself. I was just free. Free to be whoever I wanted to be. Free from the weight of comparison. Free from the warped narrative I'd been assigned. And yet, just when I thought the chapter was closing, I got a call. Unknown number. Late at night. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. There was a pause, a breath, and then a familiar voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it before. Hey, Austin. I need your help. It was Connor. There was a silence on the line that stretched for just a second too long. Not long enough to hang up, but just long enough to feel the weight of whatever was about to come. Connor, I said finally, cautious. He cleared his throat. It was quiet wherever he was. No background noise, no music, no bustling city sounds. Just the low crackle of a cheap phone speaker and breathing. Yeah, it's me. I didn't say anything. Just waited. He let out a soft, humorless laugh. You're probably the last person who wants to hear from me. Still, I stayed silent. Then, almost reluctantly, he continued. Look, I know I've messed things up. And I'm not asking you to forget everything. But I'm kinda in a situation right now. And, well, I didn't know who else to call. It would have been easy to slam the door right there. Hang up. Block the number. Go back to my peaceful, steadily improving life. But something in his voice, something new, or maybe something old that had been buried for years, stopped me. Where are you? I asked quietly. There was a pause. Vegas. Vegas? What are you doing in Vegas? Another pause. I moved out here a few weeks ago. Got a job offer. Thought it'd be a fresh start. I didn't believe him. Not entirely. It didn't line up with the last I'd heard. Marco said he'd been evicted just after New Year's. And I hadn't seen a single sign online of him making a move that big. But I let him talk. And now, he sighed. I lost it. The job. And the place. I've been staying with a friend, but that's not really working out. I thought I had this deal lined up, some marketing gig, but it fell through. I'm out of money, Austin. For a second, I could almost picture him. Disheveled, tired, not the polished version he'd always presented at family events. Not the guy who smirked over ham and pie and talked down to me like I was just a footnote in his biography. But I also remembered what he said that night. How he looked me dead in the eyes and said I was just jealous because he mattered. Funny how people find humility when they've run out of leverage. I'm not calling to ask for money, he added quickly. I know better than that. I heard you know people. Like in design and tech. You know, startup stuff. I raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me for a job referral? No. I mean, maybe. Not a job, exactly. Just an intro. Something. Anything. A foot in the door. The gall. The absolute gall. This man had publicly humiliated me, lied to our family, weaponized their approval like a sword. And now, just a few months later, here he was, hoping I'd forget all of it because he needed something. But I didn't say no. Not yet. Because suddenly, I saw something I hadn't before. An opportunity. Not for petty revenge. Not for public humiliation. But for something more surgical. More deliberate. Something he would never see coming. The old me would have snapped back. Hung up. Fumed. Or worse. Caved. Just to keep the peace. But not this version of me. This version smiled. Okay, I said slowly. Let me think about it. He exhaled, a mix of relief and disbelief. Really, I can't promise anything, I added, keeping my voice measured. But I'll see if there's anyone in my network who'd be a fit. Can you send me your resume? There was an awkward pause. Oh yeah? I'll send it tonight. I'll look out for it. We ended the call, and I sat there in the quiet for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, and I started to plan. The first thing I did was open LinkedIn and search his name. His profile was a joke, full of buzzwords, vague consulting roles, and fake titles with no companies attached. His most recent entry said Strategic Growth Executive, Confidential, which meant nothing. The summary section read like it had been copied from a motivational poster. Not a single reference. Not a single real achievement. Just empty noise. But that was useful, because it meant I had a blank canvas. And I knew exactly how to paint it. I called Marco the next morning. Is this about him again? He asked as soon as he picked up. Not exactly, I said. I need a favor. I explained what had happened. The call, the ask, and what I had in mind. Marco was quiet for a second, then laughed. The kind of low, dangerous laugh someone makes when they're remembering every unpaid rent check and late-night noise complaint. I'm in, he said. Really? Oh, absolutely. I've been waiting for an excuse. Next, I reached out to Danny. She was an old classmate of mine, ran a small creative agency that did branding work for startups and mid-sized companies. We weren't super close, but we'd always got along, and she owed me a favor from a contract I'd helped her land the year before. I pitched her the idea gently. I have this guy who's interested in marketing. Bit of a wild card. He's got a, let's say, colorful background. Not sure he's ready for anything real yet, but maybe a test project? Something small. Freelance. She raised an eyebrow. You setting me up with a con artist, Austin? Not exactly, I said. Think of it more like community service. She laughed. Fine, but I get to record the Zoom call. Over the next few days, I built a little ecosystem. A fake opportunity. Not a trap, exactly, just a mirror. One that would show Connor exactly who he really was when there was no family around to lie for him. I sent him a message the following Monday. Hey, talk to someone I know. They're looking for a freelance marketing consultant to help pitch a product to early investors. Could be a good fit. Interested? He replied within 5 minutes. Absolutely. Let me know what I need to do. I sent him Danny's info and told him she'd be in touch. I also gave Danny a short list of things to ask during the call, specific questions that would reveal whether Connor actually knew what he was talking about. Spoiler, he didn't. The call lasted 13 minutes. I know because Danny sent me the timestamp. She started with softballs. Tell me about your last campaign. What were the conversion metrics like? Connor responded with vague phrases like really strong engagement, and the team was thrilled, but couldn't name a single figure. She moved on to strategy. Say you have a product aimed at 18 to 25-year-olds, mid-tier pricing, digital distribution. What's your go-to-market plan? Connor paused, then launched into something about Instagram influencers and creating a sense of vibe-centric urgency, which isn't a thing. Finally, she asked him what KPIs he prioritized. He blinked. I mean, all of them. Afterward, she called me, still laughing. That man thought retargeting was a kind of internship. I thanked her, sent her a coffee gift card, and then I messaged Connor. Hey, how'd it go? He replied after an hour. Good. She seemed impressed. I think I nailed it. The delusion was almost impressive. I didn't respond, because now, I had everything I needed. Proof that he couldn't do the job he claimed to want. Proof that he still thought charm would carry him. And most importantly, a reason to make my next move. Because there was one piece left to play. My parents. They still didn't know the full story. They knew things had gone sideways with Connor, but they didn't know about the job lies. The fake credentials. The desperate call. They still clung to the version of him that had strutted into Christmas dinner with his expensive watch and plastic grin. But I was done letting that version stand. So I printed everything. The resume. The fake titles. The message thread. A screenshot from Danny's LinkedIn confirming she had no intention of hiring at this time. And, yes, a snippet of his email to her afterward, where he'd thanked her and said he was excited for next steps. Then I wrote a letter. Not angry, not petty, just honest. About who Connor was. About what he'd done. About how long I'd spent being treated like a footnote in my own family. And about why I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I mailed it to my parents. Then I waited. 3 days after I dropped the letter in the mailbox, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. It was from my mom. Her voice trembled like it had back when I first left for college. Except this time, it wasn't pride or sadness. It was fear. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, dawning fear of someone who's finally seeing the truth for the first time and realizing just how long they've been looking the other way. Austin, we need to talk. Please call us back. I just want to understand. I didn't call back. Not right away. Because for once, I wasn't the one desperate to make things okay. I let it sit. Let the silence stretch. Let them stew in it the way I had for years. I wasn't trying to punish them, not really. I just didn't want to rush back in like I always did. The old me would have jumped to smooth it over, to reassure them, to make them feel better about the mess they helped enable. The new me? I wanted them to feel it. A few days later, Dad called. He didn't leave a voicemail. He never does. But he texted, "We got your letter. Come by this weekend if you're free." That Saturday, I drove down. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes, whether they'd finally taken the blinders off, or if this was going to be another quiet sweep under the rug moment like everyone before it. When I walked in, the house felt different. Smaller, somehow. Or maybe it was just me that had grown. Mom was in the kitchen, pacing with a dish towel in her hands. Dad stood stiffly by the table, where a printout of Connor's fake resume sat next to a pile of emails and highlighted notes. My letter was on top, folded once, worn around the edges like it had been opened and reread a few too many times. They didn't hug me, didn't smile. Mom gestured toward the table. We went through everything. I nodded. Dad cleared his throat. Is all this accurate? Every word. He looked down, exhaled hard through his nose, and rubbed his forehead. I didn't know it was this bad. I did, I said. For years. Mom sat down, finally. Her voice was soft. Why didn't you tell us earlier? I gave her a long look. Because every time I tried, you made excuses for him. Neither of them said anything. I didn't need them to. The silence was enough. Dad sat down too. He called us. Said you ambushed him. Said you sabotaged his career. Did he also mention how he begged me for help, then lied about a job interview he bombed? He didn't, Dad admitted. Mom looked up at me, her eyes glassy. What did we do wrong? That part almost broke me. Because for all their blind spots, all their enabling, I knew deep down they weren't bad people. Just people who didn't know how to deal with the truth when it clashed with the version of the family they wanted to believe in. You believed what was easy, I said gently. You saw confidence and mistook it for success. You saw silence and mistook it for failure. Mom put a hand to her mouth. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded. I know. It wasn't about getting them to grovel. I didn't need that. I just needed the scales to fall from their eyes. For them to finally see me, not as a cautionary tale next to Connor's spotlight, but as a whole person who'd been standing in the wings for too long. They didn't ask me to forgive him. They didn't beg me to reach out. And that told me they finally understood. But I wasn't done yet. Because there was still one more act left in this play, and Connor didn't know the curtains were rising. It started with a job posting. Danny and I crafted it together. A fake startup launching a new wellness app called Saran, sleek, minimalist branding, a full-blown website with mock-ups and team bios, all professionally done. Marco even pitched in and helped write a fake funding announcement on a startup forum to make it look legit. The job posting was simple: marketing lead, remote position, base plus equity. It checked every box Connor had ever claimed to be perfect for. And the best part? We made sure the application process was open, public, and appealing enough that it would cross his radar organically. And it did. Within 48 hours of posting, I got a message from Danny. Guess who just applied? I opened the attachment. His cover letter was a masterpiece of exaggeration, vague buzzwords, fake titles, and a completely fabricated story about scaling a SaaS product to 6 figures in monthly revenue. The man didn't even Google the startup to make sure it existed. He just saw an opportunity and pounced. We gave him an interview. Not with Danny this time. With Marco. He didn't recognize Marco's voice, not over the phone. It had been years, and Marco pitched it up a bit, kept it formal. Asked Connor all the questions Danny had asked. Got the same nonsense answers. Then, at the end of the call, Marco said, "Just one last thing before we wrap." "Sure," Connor replied. "You remember not fixing that leaking pipe?" The line went silent. Marco didn't wait. "You sublet my property illegally, hosted Airbnb guests, lied about repairs, and threatened legal action. You broke the lease and the law. And now you're out here pretending you know how to build companies." Connor stammered. Wait, what?" Marco chuckled. "Good luck out there, strategic growth executive. You're gonna need it." Click. We didn't hear from him after that. But that wasn't the revenge. Not really. The real blow came a few weeks later. You see, while Connor was busy trying to rebuild his fake persona online, I was talking to a recruiter friend at a real firm. One that actually worked with several startups he was likely to approach. I didn't need to smear him. I didn't need to exaggerate. I just sent over a package. His resume, the transcript from Danny's interview, the audio from Marco's final call, and the real lease violations. "I'm not telling you what to do with this," I said. "But if his name pops up in your pipeline, you might want to know who you're dealing with." They passed it around their network. Quietly, discreetly. And just like that, doors began closing. Connor didn't know why interviews dried up, why responses turned cold, why gigs he thought he had lined up suddenly ghosted him. Because in a world built on connections, the bridges he'd burned were finally catching fire behind him. Meanwhile, I kept climbing. I got a call from the Amsterdam team I met in New York. They wanted to offer me a lead role, fully remote for the first year, then with relocation support if I wanted it. It was more money than I'd ever made. More freedom, more respect, more creative control. I said yes. When I told my parents, my mom cried. Happy tears this time. Dad asked if I needed help packing. I started selling my furniture. Gave my landlord my notice. Booked a flight for 3 months out. And then, just 2 weeks before I was set to leave, I got one last message. It was from Connor. A text. "You destroyed my life. I hope it was worth it." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, "You destroyed it yourself. I just stopped cleaning up the pieces." He didn't respond. And I didn't need him to. Because I was already gone. From the shadow of his ego. From the weight of our parents' expectations. From the tiny box I'd let myself live in for far too long. My flight to Amsterdam left at 9:35 p.m. on a quiet Thursday night. No drama. No tears. Just me, my carry-on, and a head full of clarity. As the plane ascended, city lights shrinking below me, I looked out the window one last time. And I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking into something better. My brother accidentally texted me while my family was mocking me, even though I'd been funding their bills for months. "She's just an ATM." They snickered. I stayed quiet. Until the bills piled up and they came knocking. I'm Sam, 26F. I'm not one to start drama. I'm the quiet one in the family, the one who does what's asked of her without complaining too much. But this story, it's been eating away at me for months, and I think it's finally time to tell it. I've always been the dependable one. If someone needed something, I was there. Whether it was helping with a broken down car or lending a hand when things got tough, I was the go-to person. It was just who I was. My family. They knew it. And over the years, I had gotten used to being the one who would drop everything to help out. That's just how it worked. But little by little, it started to feel like I was doing more than my fair share. And, honestly, I didn't even mind at first. After all, family is supposed to stick together, right? It started with my parents. Things were tough for them financially, especially after my dad's small business failed. They'd always been good at living above their means, but the crash hit hard. It wasn't like they had no money left. They were just in debt up to their necks. So, when my mom called me one afternoon, I wasn't surprised. "Sam, honey," she said, her voice soft and almost apologetic. "Things are a little tight this month. Your father and I are a bit behind on the mortgage, and I was wondering if you could help us out with the bills. Just for a month, maybe." I knew what a little tight meant. My dad had always been terrible with money, and my mom didn't exactly have a stable job, despite her pretending she was fine. I had a decent job, nothing crazy, but enough to make ends meet, and I didn't think twice. I said yes. I wasn't about to let them lose their house. But that 1 month turned into 3 months, and then 6. Each time, it was the same. They'd call, tell me they were just about to get things in order, and ask for a little more. And each time, I gave. Then came my brother, Matt. He's 3 years older than me, 32, and always seemed to have things a little more together on the surface. But, like everyone else in the family, he'd been struggling too. He and his wife had 2 kids, and they were living in a townhouse that, frankly, they couldn't afford. It wasn't like Matt was lazy. He worked as a part-time carpenter, but his hours were inconsistent, and his business wasn't exactly booming. His wife, Sarah, had her own side hustle, but it wasn't enough to cover their bills. Sam, could you help us out with the rent this month? He asked, almost apologetically, when I got a text one afternoon. Things are just a little crazy right now. I wasn't thrilled about it, but what was I supposed to do? It was family. I agreed, but I asked him to make sure things didn't get to this point again. Of course, that didn't happen. The rent became a regular request, and then the car insurance, and then groceries. Matt would send me texts, sometimes in the middle of the day, sometimes late at night, asking for help. And each time, I'd say yes. Because what else was I supposed to do? He was family, after all. At first, it felt okay. It felt like I was doing my part. But the more I gave, the more they took, and the less they seemed to care about it. There was no thank you anymore. No acknowledgement that I was the one keeping everything afloat. In fact, when I didn't answer the phone right away or couldn't send money fast enough, I'd hear little comments like, well, Sam's always too busy, or she's just got more money than she knows what to do with. It stung, but I brushed it off. I didn't want to be petty. I kept thinking that as long as I helped them out, things would eventually get better. But they didn't. They just kept asking. And I kept giving. Then came the day everything changed. I had been dealing with a particularly stressful week at work. A major project was due, and I had to juggle a few last-minute changes. I was at my desk, trying to focus, when I saw my phone buzz. It was a text from Matt. Sam, can you help out with the car payment this month? The bill's due, and we're a little short. I sighed. This wasn't the first time I'd gotten this request. But what really made my blood run cold was the message that followed. Honestly, I don't know how much longer we can keep relying on Sam. It's like she doesn't realize she's just an ATM for us. We're not asking her to do everything, but she just keeps paying and paying. And it's not like she has unlimited cash, but she thinks she does. I get it. She wants to feel needed, but this is ridiculous. I stared at the screen for a long time. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. That text wasn't meant for me. It was meant for his wife, Sarah. But Matt had sent it to me by accident. I couldn't breathe. For a second, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront him right there and then, but I knew better than to start a fight over a text message. So I stayed quiet. I didn't respond. I didn't want to escalate things, not yet. The next few days were tense. I didn't bring it up to Matt. I didn't bring it up to anyone. But the guilt, the anger, the feeling of betrayal, it stayed with me. I couldn't shake it. I'd been funding their lives for months, and they saw me as nothing more than a cash machine, a tool to make their lives easier. But the worst part? I could tell they knew they had me. They knew I wouldn't say no. They knew that every time they called, I'd answer. They knew I'd send the money. It had become a pattern, and I had let it continue. Until now. It wasn't long before my mom called me again. Sweetheart, she said, her voice full of that same tone. We're behind on the mortgage again. Your father's been talking to the bank, but we need a little help to catch up. That was it. I snapped. I didn't say it out loud, but in my mind, I was done. I had given so much, and yet they still didn't see me as anything more than their personal ATM. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pouring money into a pit that would never be filled. I didn't respond to my mom right away. Instead, I decided to sit on it. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But the day after that call, I got another text. This one wasn't from Matt. It was from my mom. Sam, please, We need you. We can't do this without you." And that's when I realized they were doing this without me. They just didn't know it yet. So I made my decision. I wasn't going to keep helping. I wasn't going to bail them out anymore. But what I didn't know then was that they weren't going to take it quietly. The next few days were strangely quiet. Too quiet. My parents didn't call again, and Matt didn't send any texts asking for more money. I couldn't tell if they were giving me space to think, or if they were waiting for me to come to them. But I knew what was coming. There was no way they'd just let me go this easily, not after all the times I'd bailed them out. It had become a habit, a cycle they depended on, and breaking that cycle was going to be more difficult than I realized. It was the evening of the 5th day after I made the decision that I wasn't going to fund them anymore when my mom called again. The tone of her voice, though soft, had a strange edge to it. It was like she knew, somehow, that something had shifted. She had a way of sensing when I was pulling away. "Sam, honey, we really need to talk," she said, trying to sound casual, but I could tell the anxiety was creeping into her voice. "I know things have been tough, but I'm really worried about your dad. We're just not sure how we're going to make it through the next month without a little help." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I could already feel the guilt creeping in. I wanted to say something, to explain that I couldn't keep doing this, but I knew what she would say. She'd say the same thing she always said. "You're the only one who can help us, Sam. Or you don't want us to lose the house, do you?" She'd tug on every emotional string she could, like she always did. Instead, I remained quiet. I wanted to be strong. "You're the only one who can fix this," she added, this time almost pleading. "We've been through so much, and I know you've been generous, but we're falling behind, and I just don't know what to do anymore." I wanted to tell her that I didn't know what to do either, that I was tired of being the one they turned to every single time they needed help, that I was exhausted from carrying the weight of their failures on my shoulders. But all I said was, "I'll think about it." That was the last conversation I had with my mom before everything came crashing down. The next day, my brother Matt showed up at my apartment unannounced. He'd done this a few times before, usually when he needed something. I wasn't sure if he'd come to talk to me about the text he'd accidentally sent, or if he was here because he needed money. But the moment I opened the door, I could see it in his eyes. The guilt, the frustration. He knew something was off, and he wasn't ready to face it. "Sam, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm but strangely nervous. "Look, I know I messed up with that text. I didn't mean for you to see that. But, come on, you have to understand. We need your help. We can't keep going like this." I stepped aside to let him in, trying to keep my emotions in check. The last thing I wanted was for this conversation to turn into a shouting match, but I was done playing the role of the enabler. I was done being the family bank. "Matt," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, "I've been helping for months. I've paid your rent. I've covered Mom and Dad's bills. I've done everything I can, and I'm just tired. You and Sarah should have planned better. You should have thought about the future before you spent money you didn't have. I can't keep doing this." He didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me like he couldn't believe what I was saying. It was almost as if he couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that I was saying no, that I was finally setting a boundary. "Sam," he finally said, his voice rising, "You're family. We're family. You don't just walk away from family when they need you. You don't just bail out because it's inconvenient." "I'm not bailing," I replied, standing my ground. "I'm just not going to be the one to fix everything for you anymore. I can't keep being the one who carries the load for everyone else." Matt's face twisted with frustration. "You don't get it, do you? We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for you to help us get back on our feet. But I guess that's too much to ask. You're just like everyone else, huh? Just going to leave us hanging." It was hard to keep my composure, but I managed. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted him to understand that I wasn't the solution to their problems. I couldn't be, and I wasn't going to keep enabling their bad decisions. But instead of understanding, Matt just shook his head. "You're being selfish, Sam. You always act like you're the one who's been wronged, but you're not. We're struggling here. You've got everything you need, and you can't even help out your own family. My heart pounded in my chest. It was like all the months of feeling unappreciated, all the resentment I'd been carrying, were finally bubbling to the surface. But instead of lashing out, I took a deep breath. Matt, it's not that I don't want to help. It's that I've been helping too much. You and Sarah need to figure things out on your own. I can't be the one to rescue you every time something goes wrong. Matt stared at me, his eyes hardening. He looked like he was about to say something else, but he paused. His gaze flickered to the door, and for a second, I thought he might just leave and accept it. But instead, he did something I didn't expect. He took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging. Then he muttered, "I guess we'll just have to figure it out ourselves. Thanks for nothing." He walked out without another word, leaving me standing there, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. It was over, or so I thought. The very next day, my mom called me again. But this time, her voice was different. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't trying to manipulate me with her soft tone. This time, she was angry. "You've really let us down, Sam," she said, her voice cold. "I thought you were better than this. You've always been the one we could rely on, and now you're just turning your back on us? We've always supported you, but I guess that doesn't mean anything to you." My heart sank. This wasn't the mom I knew. This was a version of her that I had never seen before, and it scared me. "I'm not turning my back on you," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just saying no. For once, I'm saying no." "You've made a huge mistake," she snapped. "We'll see how long you can keep this up. We'll see if you can live with yourself when you're the one who ruins this family." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But her threat loomed over me, a constant reminder that this was far from over. The days that followed were a strange kind of calm. After my last conversation with Matt, I didn't hear from him or my mom for a few days. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Part of me thought maybe they were finally processing everything, maybe coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to be their fallback plan anymore. But I knew deep down it wouldn't be that simple. I kept to my routine: work, home, a quiet evening. But it wasn't long before things started to change. I'd wake up to more texts, but not from the usual suspects. My cousin, Claire, started messaging me regularly, asking if everything was okay. It wasn't unusual for us to chat, but I could tell she was trying to get information. She always had a way of pretending to be on my side, but somehow, I always ended up feeling like I was being questioned. "Hey, Sam, I've been hearing some things about you. You okay?" she texted one morning. The message was casual, but I could sense the undercurrent of curiosity. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't know how much to say. I knew Claire had a way of working her way into situations, and if I wasn't careful, I could end up spilling more than I intended. Eventually, I wrote back, keeping it simple. "I'm fine. Just busy." "Why?" Her reply came within minutes. "Well, it's just. I've heard some stuff. Mom and Matt are really upset. They think you've been a little harsh. Are you sure you want to do this?" The words hit harder than I expected. Harsh. That was the label they were trying to stick on me. I wasn't helping anymore. I was harsh. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I didn't want to get caught up in her game. Claire had always been the type to sit back and watch the drama unfold, but somehow end up as the peacemaker after everything blew up. I knew I had to be careful, so I kept my response short. "I'm doing what's best for me, Claire. They need to figure things out on their own. I'm not going to keep enabling them." The next few days were filled with messages from both Matt and my mom, but they weren't as direct as they had been before. Instead of asking for money outright, they started to play more subtle games. My mom called me one evening, her voice dripping with a fake cheerfulness. "Sam, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Your dad and I have been talking, and we were thinking maybe if you could help out just a little with the mortgage, it wouldn't be so hard on everyone. We're not asking for much, just a little." I clenched my fists, trying not to let my anger get the better of me. The manipulation was obvious now. They weren't even pretending to care about how I was doing. It was just about what they needed, what they wanted from me. I bit my tongue before responding. "I've already told you, I'm not in a position to help." You and Dad need to figure it out. I can't keep bailing you out." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. "Sam, I don't know what's gotten into you. You used to be so generous, so willing to help. This isn't like you." That was it. The guilt trip. The emotional manipulation. I could feel my blood pressure rising. But this time, I didn't bite. I didn't apologize. I didn't give in. "I'm still generous, Mom. But I'm not going to let you keep using me like this. I'm not your ATM." The silence on the other end was deafening, but before she could respond, I ended the call. My chest was tight, and I could feel my hands trembling from the anger I was holding in. I was done. They could keep trying to twist things, keep playing the victim, but I was done. A few days later, things escalated in a way I hadn't expected. Matt sent me a text, not asking for money, but accusing me of betraying the family. The message was long and loaded with guilt. He didn't understand why I was being so cold or why I couldn't help my family when they needed it most. I could almost hear his frustration through the words. It wasn't the usual, "Can you help with this bill?" or "We're struggling, Sam." It was more personal. "You know, Sam, it's easy for you to act like you've got everything figured out. But just remember, when you're alone and no one's there for you, we won't be able to help you. You've made your choice." The words stung, but they also felt like a challenge. And as I read them over and over again, I realized something. They weren't just asking for money anymore. They were trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty, into believing that I was the problem. They were trying to shift the blame, to make me question my decision to finally set boundaries. But that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me because I had become their safe place, their scapegoat. It was time to take back control. But I didn't want to go too far. I didn't want to become a villain in my own story. What I needed was a subtle but effective way to make them see the consequences of their actions. I didn't want to destroy relationships, but I needed them to understand that there were limits to what I would tolerate. That's when the idea came to me. It was small at first, a subtle shift that wouldn't draw too much attention, but it would have an impact. I decided to stop helping with the bills completely, but I didn't just cut them off. Instead, I started redirecting them. I opened a joint bank account with Matt, one that I had been keeping on the side for a while. It was set up with the idea that if things got really bad, I could contribute without directly handing over cash. I hadn't used it in months, but it was time. I started transferring money from my personal account to the joint one, but the transfers were small and very specific. Each transfer was tied to something important, something they had asked for help with in the past. I didn't just give them money for rent, or the mortgage, or the car insurance. Instead, I started helping them in a way that made it clear how much they had taken for granted. For instance, I sent money to the joint account marked mortgage, but only enough for 1 week of the payment. And then I sent another transfer a few days later with a note that said, "This should cover half of your car insurance this month." I could almost feel the tension build with each deposit. My family was used to me covering entire payments. The gradual, piecemeal approach would make them realize how hard they had been pushing me. They'd see just how little they had been doing for themselves. And when they came asking for the full amount, I'd be ready. A week passed, and the tension grew thicker each day. I could sense the frustration mounting, especially from Matt. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the control, the power I had slowly been taking back. He was beginning to realize that his usual tactics weren't working anymore, and it was obvious he didn't like it. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from him. This time, it wasn't a long message. It was short, sharp, and to the point. "We need to talk. This can't keep going on. Come over tonight." I knew this was it, the confrontation I'd been waiting for. It was finally time for them to see the reality of what I'd been trying to say all along. I couldn't keep bailing them out. I wasn't their ATM anymore, and I wasn't going to be manipulated into doing something I didn't want to do. That evening, I went to their house, feeling a mixture of nerves and anticipation. When I walked through the door, I found Matt and my parents sitting at the kitchen table, all looking at me with that same disappointed expression they had worn the last few times we'd talked. But there was something different about it this time. There was an edge to their anger, and they knew they weren't going to get away with their usual tricks. "Sam," my mom began, trying to sound calm, "we need to talk about all this. We can't keep living like this. You're our daughter. You're supposed to help us when we're in need." I didn't say anything at first. I just watched them, trying to keep my composure. I could feel the years of resentment, of all the times they'd leaned on me, building up inside me. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. "I've already helped you more than enough," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'm done doing it. I'm not going to keep carrying the weight of your problems. You need to start taking responsibility for yourselves." My mom's eyes narrowed, and Matt's jaw clenched. "So, what? You're just going to turn your back on us?" Matt asked, his voice rising with anger. "After everything we've done for you? You've done plenty for me, haven't you?" I replied, "But it's never been enough. It's always, 'Give me more, Sam. Help me, Sam.' And I've had enough. I can't keep doing this." "Stop being so dramatic," Matt spat. "You think you're the only one struggling? We've been dealing with so much, and you're just going to walk away." I stood my ground, feeling the power shift in my favor. "No, Matt. You're the one who needs to start dealing with things. I'm not your savior. I'm not your ATM. You and Mom need to figure it out on your own. You've had more than enough chances." The room was silent for a moment as they took in what I was saying. I could see the wheels turning in Matt's head, trying to figure out how to manipulate me again. But it wasn't going to work. Not this time. My dad finally spoke up, his voice low and resigned. "We didn't raise you to abandon family like this, Sam." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said firmly. "I'm finally standing up for myself. And if that means I'm not the person you want me to be, then so be it. I'm not going to let you use me anymore." The silence that followed felt heavy. It was the first time in years that I had truly stood up for myself, and while part of me expected them to come back with more arguments, more manipulation, they didn't. It was as if they didn't know how to handle this new version of me, the version who had finally taken control of her own life. "I'm sorry, Sam," my mom said softly, the words barely audible. "But we don't know how we'll survive without your help." I shook my head. "You will. You'll figure it out. I know you can." Matt stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Fine. If that's how it is, then we're done. But don't expect us to come crawling back next time you need something. You'll regret this." I didn't flinch. "I won't. This is what's best for all of us." As I walked out of their house that night, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't the kind of victory I had imagined. There were no hugs, no thank yous, no happy endings. But I knew I had made the right decision. I had finally set boundaries, healthy ones, and they weren't going to be crossed anymore. The weeks that followed were surprisingly peaceful. My mom and Matt didn't reach out as much. When they did, it was brief, and it was clear they had to rely on others, not me. I didn't cut them off completely, but I no longer let them dictate my life or my finances. I started focusing on myself, on my own financial independence, my own goals, and my own future. I did hear from Claire a few times after that. She checked in, asking how I was doing, and I told her I was doing better than ever. She never asked about the family again. Eventually, I started to notice a shift. My parents were forced to reevaluate their financial habits. They stopped asking for handouts, and they started making changes. Matt and Sarah, though they still struggled, began to take responsibility for their own mistakes. It wasn't easy for any of them, but I could see they were learning to stand on their own 2 feet. As for me, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't their fallback anymore. I was finally living for myself.
Hi, Reddit. I guess I should start by introducing myself. My name is Emily, and I'm 26 years old. I work a full-time job, and while I love my family, I've always been the one they dump their kids on whenever they need a break. At first, I didn't mind. I love my nieces and nephews, and I figured helping out every once in a while was just part of being a good sister and aunt. But over the past year, it's gotten completely out of hand. What used to be the occasional weekend favor has turned into a full-time unpaid second job. My brother, Ryan, and his wife, Jessica, have 3 kids under the age of 7, and my cousin, Melissa, has a 4-year-old daughter. Somewhere along the way, they all decided that I was the family babysitter. At first, they would ask a few days in advance, which was fine. But lately, it's been last-minute dumps on me, like calling me an hour before they have plans and just assuming I'll say yes. I've canceled plans, missed outings with my friends, and even had to work remotely from their house just so I can watch the kids. The breaking point happened last weekend. I was finally looking forward to a me day, something I rarely get. I had a whole plan: sleep in, go for brunch, maybe even do some shopping. But right as I was about to leave the house, my phone rang. It was Ryan. "Hey, can you watch the kids for a few hours? Jess and I have dinner plans." I checked the time. Dinner plans? It's barely noon. "I can't today, I have plans," I said, trying to be firm. He groaned. "Come on, it's just for a little bit. We really need this night out." "Ryan, it's noon," I said, exasperated. "Are you seriously just telling me this now?" He got all defensive, saying they forgot to ask me earlier and figured I'd be free since I never do anything on weekends. That comment set me off. I told him straight up, I'm done babysitting. No more last-minute requests. No more assuming I'm available. If they needed a sitter, they could hire one like everyone else. He got mad. He actually had the audacity to say, "Wow, so you're really just going to abandon your family over something this small?" Small? I hung up, feeling guilty for about 5 seconds before I realized, I shouldn't have to feel guilty. I've done more than enough. But then, the text started rolling in. And that's when I realized, my family wasn't going to let this go that easily. So after hanging up on Ryan, I thought that would be the end of it, like maybe they'd finally understand I needed my own time. But boy, was I wrong. Not even an hour later, I started getting texts from my mom. "Emily, what's going on? Ryan just called me saying you're refusing to help him out. Is everything okay?" It was clear he had already spun his version of the story, painting me as the selfish one who just didn't want to support the family. I tried to explain myself, telling her how it's been overwhelming and how I'm always the one canceling plans and bending over backward. She responded with a classic line, "But they're family, Emily. Family helps each other out. You'll understand one day when you have kids of your own." I couldn't believe it. Suddenly, my legitimate boundaries were being dismissed as a lack of understanding because I wasn't a parent yet. That really got under my skin. But before I could even respond, another text popped up, this time from Jessica, my sister-in-law. Her message was a long paragraph about how ungrateful I was being. She went on about how much they appreciated everything I've done, but that it was disappointing to see me abandon them when they needed me the most. She even threw in a line about how I'd regret this when I needed help one day. The irony wasn't lost on me. When had they ever dropped everything to help me? And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Melissa chimed in too. Apparently, Ryan had been on a family-wide campaign, rallying support against me. Melissa sent a short but pointed message. "Wow, didn't expect this from you, Emily. Thought you were better than this." I could feel my blood boiling. Was I seriously being guilt-tripped by every single member of my family for daring to say I needed a break? At that point, my phone was buzzing non-stop with notifications from our family group chat, everyone weighing in, everyone with an opinion. But then came the cherry on top. My dad, who usually stays out of these things, decided to send a voice message to the group chat. His voice was calm but firm, the kind of tone he uses when he's trying to lay down the law. He said, "Emily, I don't know what's going on, but your brother and Jessica really need you right now. Family sticks together. This is just a little help. It's not like they're asking you to raise the kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A little help? Was no one seeing how this had turned into a full-on expectation that I'd be available at their beck and call? I finally had enough. I took a deep breath and typed out a message to the group chat. "I love you all, but I need to set some boundaries. I'm happy to help when I can, but I'm not available for last-minute babysitting anymore. I have my own life and responsibilities, and I need you to respect that." The chat went silent for a few minutes, and I thought maybe, just maybe, they were letting it sink in. But then, Ryan sent another message. "Fine. Just don't come crying to us when you need something." And that, right there, was the moment I knew this wasn't just about babysitting, it was about control. My family was so used to me saying yes, so used to me being the reliable one, that the moment I stood up for myself, they couldn't handle it. I was furious, but also hurt. How did things escalate so quickly? Why was my entire family turning against me just because I wanted a weekend to myself? But before I could even process that message, I got a knock on my door. It was Melissa, standing there, with her 4-year-old in tow, eyes filled with frustration. "Emily, I need you to take her for a few hours. I have an appointment, and I can't reschedule. You owe me this after everything." My jaw dropped. Was she serious? I stared at Melissa, completely dumbfounded. She was standing there, arms crossed, her daughter clutching her leg, completely unaware of the tension brewing between us. "Melissa, are you serious right now?" I finally managed to say. "Did you not read the message I just sent to the group chat?" She sighed dramatically, shifting her weight to one side. "Emily, come on. It's just for a few hours. I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't important." I folded my arms. "And I wouldn't be saying no if I didn't mean it." Her jaw clenched. "You know, I really didn't think you'd turn your back on family like this." There it was. The guilt trip. The same manipulative nonsense I'd been dealing with for years. But this time, I wasn't caving. "I'm not turning my back on anyone," I said firmly. "I've just reached my limit. I told you guys I'm not babysitting anymore." Melissa scoffed. "Wow. I guess all that family first stuff doesn't apply when it's inconvenient for you, huh?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Melissa, I don't see you offering to babysit Ryan's kids every weekend. Or dropping everything when Jessica and my brother suddenly decide they need time away. Funny how I'm the only one expected to do this." She rolled her eyes. "That's different." "How?" I challenged. She opened her mouth, then shut it. After a few seconds, she sighed. "Whatever. Forget it." She grabbed her daughter's hand and turned to leave. I thought that was the end of it. But then, just as she was walking down my driveway, she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "You'll regret this." That sent a chill down my spine. Regret what? Setting boundaries? Not being a doormat? What did she even mean by that? I went inside, locked the door, and sat down, trying to calm myself. But my gut told me this wasn't over. And sure enough, I was right. About an hour later, I got a notification. Then another. Then another. I grabbed my phone and felt my stomach drop. Melissa had posted about me on Facebook. A long, passive-aggressive post about some people in the family who suddenly think they're too good to help out when others are struggling. She talked about how some people forget where they come from and it's sad when family members change for the worse. And the worst part? The comments. Ryan had commented, "Wow. Disappointing." Jessica chimed in with, "Some people just don't understand what it's like to be a parent." Even my mom had liked the post. I felt my blood boiling. They were turning the entire family against me. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I got a text from my boss. A work text. "Hey Emily, everything okay? I just got an odd email about you. Call me when you get a chance." I felt my heart drop. What the hell was going on? I felt my stomach twist as I stared at the message from my boss. An email? About me? My hands were shaking as I hit call. "Hey, Emily," my boss answered almost immediately. "I just wanted to check in because I got a really weird email this morning about you, and I wanted to hear your side before I take any action." My side? My heart pounded. What was it about? He sighed. "Someone claiming to be a concerned family member sent an anonymous email saying you've been acting unstable and irresponsible lately. They suggested that your workload might be too much for you, and you might need time off." I nearly dropped my phone. Are you kidding me? I took a deep breath. I can tell you exactly what's going on. My family is upset with me because I set a boundary and told them I wouldn't babysit for them anymore. I'm guessing this is their way of punishing me. My boss let out a long sigh. Honestly, I had a feeling it was something personal. You've never given me a reason to doubt you, and I didn't believe any of it. But I wanted to hear it straight from you. I clenched my jaw. I appreciate that. But does this affect my job? No, he said firmly. It's just ridiculous that someone would go that far. I'll ignore it, but if they try again, let me know. I thanked him and hung up, my blood boiling. I knew my family was manipulative, but trying to mess with my job? That was a new low. I marched straight to my laptop, opened Facebook, and clicked on Melissa's post. The comments section had exploded, everyone was taking sides. Some people agreed with her, others were calling her out. But my brother, Ryan, had posted something that made my vision blur with rage. He wrote, "Well, When someone prioritizes their selfish boundaries over family, it's no surprise they start slipping in other areas of life. Guess we all see who Emily really is now. Slipping? Oh, he did not just say that. I started typing before I could stop myself. Funny how my selfish boundaries only became a problem when I stopped being your free babysitter. You all act like I owe you my time just because I don't have kids, but here's a reality check, I don't. And the fact that someone in this family actually tried to sabotage my job just proves I made the right decision by walking away. Then, before anyone could respond, I turned off my phone. I was done playing nice. But I should have known, this wasn't over. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. And when I opened it, my mother was standing there, arms crossed, looking furious. I froze in the doorway, gripping the edge of the door so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mother stood there, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes scanning me like I was some sort of disappointment. She wasn't alone. My brother, Ryan, was right behind her, arms crossed, looking like he was enjoying this. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "What are you doing here?" She let out a sharp breath, stepping inside like she owned the place. "We need to talk. Now." I didn't move. "About what?" "How my family is trying to ruin my life because I finally said no." Ryan scoffed. "Oh, please. Stop playing the victim, Emily. You made your choice. You decided you were too good for this family, and now you're dealing with the consequences." I turned to him, my anger bubbling over. "The consequences? For what, exactly? For refusing to be a free babysitter? For wanting a life of my own?" My mom threw her hands up. "Emily, do you even hear yourself? Family helps each other. That's what we do." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? Where was all this help when I needed something? When I was moving apartments last year? When I was struggling with work stress? No one was offering to support me. It only goes one way, doesn't it?" My mom's eyes narrowed. "That's different." "Of course it is," I muttered. She placed her hands on her hips. "Listen, Emily, this whole attitude of yours needs to stop. Your sister. She's not my responsibility," I cut in. "None of them are." Mom inhaled sharply. "Fine. If you want to be selfish, be selfish. But don't come crying to us when you realize you've pushed everyone away." I stared at her, my chest tightening. It was almost funny how fast they were willing to cut me off when all I did was stop bending over backward for them. Ryan smirked. "By the way, you might want to check your Facebook. Mom made a post about this, and, let's just say, you're not looking too good right now." My stomach twisted. "You what?" Mom shrugged, pulling out her phone and showing me the post. My heart pounded as I read the words. "It's sad when family forgets what love really means. Some people get so caught up in their own selfish lives that they can't even spare a few days to help those who raise them. But that's okay. Some lessons are learned the hard way." And the worst part? The comments were filled with relatives and family friends, all agreeing with her. Talking about how entitled and ungrateful I was. How pathetic it was that I refused to help my own flesh and blood. My vision blurred with anger. This wasn't just a guilt trip. This was character assassination. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "All right," I said, voice low and firm. "If this is how it's going to be, then let's be clear, I'm done." My mom blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean done. With all of you. With the babysitting. With the guilt trips. With this whole toxic mess. You don't respect me, and you never have. So go ahead, spread your lies. Play the victim. But don't expect me to be part of this family anymore." Ryan snorted. "Oh, give me a break. You're not actually going to cut us off." I met his gaze, unwavering. "Watch me." Then, without another word, I turned around and slammed the door in their faces. My hands were shaking as I locked it. My heart pounded in my chest. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Or at least, I thought I was. Because an hour later, I got a text from my landlord. "Hey, Emily. I just got a strange call from someone claiming to be a concerned relative. They asked if I was aware of any reckless behavior going on at your apartment. We need to talk." My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to ruin my reputation. They were trying to ruin my entire life. I stared at my phone, my breath caught in my throat. They wouldn't. They couldn't. But the proof was right in front of me. My own family was trying to sabotage me. I immediately called my landlord, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Hey, what exactly did they say?" He hesitated. They didn't give a name. Just said they were a close relative and that they were worried about you. They mentioned loud noises, strange people coming in and out of your apartment. Even drugs. I nearly dropped the phone. What? That's completely insane. I figured it was weird, my landlord admitted. You've never been a problem tenant. But I have to check these things out. We should meet tomorrow to talk. I agreed, then hung up, my hands shaking with fury. I didn't even need to guess who was behind this. My mom. And maybe Ryan too. They couldn't guilt-trip me into submission, so now they were trying to scare me into crawling back. But they underestimated me. I wasn't a kid anymore. I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I'd have to do. I blocked my own mother and my brother from my phone. No calls. No texts. No access. And just as I was about to finally relax, my phone dinged again. A Facebook notification. I clicked on it, and my stomach dropped. Mom had posted again. I don't know what to do anymore. I raised my daughter with love and care, and now she's shutting me out completely. I'm heartbroken. Please, if you've ever known the pain of being abandoned by your own child, say a prayer for me tonight. Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. Relatives. Family, friends. Even strangers were chiming in. So sorry you're going through this, sweetheart. Some kids are just ungrateful. This generation has no respect. It's disgusting. Emily should be ashamed of herself. My blood boiled. This wasn't just a guilt trip. This was a smear campaign. And it was only getting worse, because 5 minutes later, I got a text from my boss. Hey, Emily. I just saw something online about you. Can we talk first thing tomorrow? I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Now my job was at risk. My entire life was unraveling. And my own mother was the one pulling the strings. I couldn't breathe. Every part of me wanted to scream, but instead, I sat down on my couch, phone still in hand, trying to process the chaos my life had become. The Facebook post, the phone call from my landlord, and now this, my boss texting me about some kind of online drama. I took a deep breath, tried to steady myself. This is just the beginning. I needed to take control, but how? My mind was racing. I thought back to every conversation I'd had with my mom. Every time she'd pushed my boundaries, every time she'd manipulated the situation to make me feel guilty. But I had finally said no. And now she was making me pay for it. I needed to act fast. I shot off a message to my boss. Hi, boss, I saw your message. I'm aware of what's being said online, and I'm taking care of it. I promise this won't affect my work performance, but I understand if you need to speak with me. Let me know when you're free. With that sent, I put my phone down and leaned back against the couch. My head was spinning. Could I lose my job over this? I'd worked so hard to get to where I was, to finally build some stability for myself. And now, it was all at risk because of this family drama, but even though I was scared, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let my mom and Ryan destroy everything I'd worked for. Then, an idea hit me. If they wanted to play dirty, so could I. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my social media accounts. No more being a passive victim. I had to fight back. I typed a response to my mom's post, but this time, I wasn't holding back. To everyone commenting, just so you know, this is an attempt at emotional manipulation. I've always tried to do what's right by my family, but this is not okay. I will not be guilt-tripped into doing something I don't want to do. I'm an adult with my own life, and I will not be made to feel bad for taking care of myself. I hope this clears up any confusion. Please, stop spreading lies. I hit send and sat back, waiting for the storm to hit. But what happened next surprised me. Within minutes, I started getting messages from family members. What's going on, Emily? I had no idea it was like this. You're not the one to blame. I had no idea your mom was treating you like this. Even a few cousins reached out, saying they'd been through similar situations with their own parents and understood what I was going through. Some people even liked my comment. But then, I got another text, this time from my mom. How dare you air our dirty laundry like that? I thought we were family. You're a disgrace. I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at the message, a strange mix of relief and anger settling over me. For the first time, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. But that didn't last long. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed with a notification. My boss had posted a public statement about me on Facebook. We've seen some troubling posts from one of our employees recently. At company, we have zero tolerance for personal drama affecting work. Emily, I hope this isn't going to interfere with your role. I stared at the screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. Was my job really on the line now? I had to act fast. I typed up another message to my boss. Hi, boss, I just want to clarify that the posts online are not reflective of my professional behavior. I'm committed to my work, and this personal matter will not impact my performance. I appreciate your understanding and would love the chance to discuss this further if needed. I pressed send, but as I did, I couldn't help but wonder, what's going to happen next? My hands were shaking as I set the phone down, staring at the screen where my boss's message still hovered in the chat. It felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the next bomb to drop. But nothing came right away. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could finally get some peace. I needed to breathe, to think clearly. Maybe this would all blow over, right? Maybe if I just explained everything to my boss in person, I could avoid this whole mess. But deep down, I knew things were only getting started. I'd always been the peacemaker in my family, trying to keep the peace, keeping everyone happy. But today, I wasn't just Emily, the dutiful daughter and sister. Today, I was someone who refused to be treated like a doormat. I sat back, my mind racing. How did it come to this? I wondered. I had always been there for them, babysitting, helping out whenever they needed me. But all of that was thrown back in my face. My mom and Ryan didn't care about what I needed. They saw me as their servant, their backup. They were using me like a tool, and I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. Just then, another text came through. Emily, you've made a huge mistake. I can't believe you're turning your back on your own family like this. I'll pray for you. I immediately recognized the number. It was my aunt, Mom's sister. I bit back a laugh. Pray for me? I had to hold myself back from texting a snarky response. Instead, I blocked her too. But as I set my phone down again, a sudden thought hit me. What if I didn't have to face this alone? What if I reached out to my friends, the people who'd always had my back? Maybe they could help me sort this mess out. I started texting a few close friends, telling them what had been happening. Each time I hit send, I felt a little lighter. It wasn't just my family that I needed to lean on. I had a support system. My friends were furious on my behalf. I can't believe they're treating you like this. You've been nothing but amazing to them. You need to take a step back and make sure you're doing what's best for you. Don't let them drag you into their chaos. I couldn't help but feel comforted by their support. But just when I thought I had some peace, another notification buzzed on my phone. This time, it wasn't a text. It was from my landlord. I opened it with trepidation. Hey, Emily, I just wanted to let you know that I'm taking action regarding the complaint that was filed. I've reached out to the proper authorities to make sure everything is investigated thoroughly. Please be aware that I'm going to need your full cooperation in this matter. My stomach dropped. I felt the walls closing in. It wasn't just my family that was trying to tear me down. Now the authorities were involved. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went, but I knew I couldn't back down now. I had to figure out what was really going on before it was too late. And then, as if everything wasn't already insane enough, I got a call, not a text, but an actual call, from my mom. I stared at the screen, frozen. What was she going to say this time? I hesitated for a second, but I knew I had to answer. Whatever was coming, I was ready. I answered. Hello? My voice was steady, but inside, my heart was racing. There was a long pause. I could hear her taking deep breaths. I knew she was choosing her words carefully. Emily. Her voice sounded almost tired. I know you're upset, but please, you need to understand. We didn't mean to push you this far. I just need you to babysit one more time. Just this once, so we can go on this trip. Please. I could feel the pressure building in my chest. Not again, I thought. They just don't get it. I had given them more than enough chances. This wasn't about one more babysitting night. This was about years of being taken for granted. I told you I'm done, I snapped. I'm not doing it anymore. I can't just keep dropping everything whenever you need me. I have my own life, my own job, my own boundaries that you've ignored for years. My mom's tone shifted, but it wasn't what I expected. She didn't sound apologetic. She didn't even sound angry. She sounded disappointed. Emily, you're being selfish, she said, her voice low. We've always helped you out when you needed it. We've done everything for you. And this is how you repay us? Selfish? That word hit me like a slap in the face. I had spent my whole life helping them, babysitting, covering for them, sacrificing my time and energy, and this was how she saw me? No, Mom. You're being selfish, I said, feeling the fire in me build. You think I owe you this? I'm not your backup plan anymore. You can't just keep using me like that. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say anything. Then, the twist. Fine, she said, almost bitterly. But don't come crawling back when you need us to help you. Don't come crying to me when everything falls apart. That was it. That was the moment I realized I'd never win. No matter how many boundaries I set, no matter how hard I tried to distance myself, they would always try to pull me back in. And now, they were trying to guilt-trip me into feeling like I was the bad guy. But something inside me snapped. I'm not going to let her guilt-trip me anymore. Goodbye, Mom, I said, my voice cold. I'll never be the person you can manipulate again. The call ended with a sharp click, and I stood there, phone in hand, my thoughts racing. I had made the decision, but now, I was feeling the weight of it. Was I making a mistake? Was I really willing to cut ties with my family? But the answer was clear. I wasn't going to let them keep using me. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. And just as I was about to throw my phone on the couch, another message came through. It was from my brother. You really screwed this up, Emily. You think we're just going to let you walk away from the family like this? This is the last time we'll ask for your help. Don't come crying to us when your life falls apart. The message made my stomach twist in knots. But as I stared at the screen, I realized something. I wasn't the one who had screwed up. They had. And now, it was time for me to finally stand my ground. So, now that I've laid it all out, here's my question. Am I the a-hole for standing up for myself and refusing to babysit anymore, even though my family always expects me to drop everything at the last minute? I've been doing it for years, and when I finally said enough was enough, my mom tried to guilt-trip me, and my brother's sending me angry messages.
Wow, what a crazy situation. It looks like Emily's family isn't going down without a fight. But will she stand her ground, or will they manage to pull her back in? To find out what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss the next chapter in this wild family drama. Stay tuned for more updates.
There are moments in your life when you think, okay, that's the worst it's ever going to get. And then, somehow, your family finds a way to outdo themselves. My name's Rowan. I'm 27, and I guess you could say I'm the designated black sheep of my family, though I've never really earned that title. It's not like I'm a criminal or anything. I work a regular job, I keep to myself, and I've never caused anyone trouble. But I didn't follow the path they laid out for me. The path paved in fake smiles, proper college degrees, and pretending our family didn't have skeletons bursting from every closet. That's the part they really couldn't forgive. I wasn't always the disappointment. In fact, when I was a kid, I was everyone's golden boy. Good grades, polite, a little shy, but well-behaved. My Aunt Gloria used to gush over me at every holiday. Rowan's going to be the first doctor in the family, she'd say, loud enough for my cousins to hear. You watch. And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? I didn't know at the time that their praise came with invisible strings, strings that wrapped tighter the older I got, strings they expected me to pull just the way they liked. Things started to change around high school. I had a knack for writing and storytelling. I loved digging into messy characters and messy families and writing stories that made people feel something. I wanted to study literature. That's when the switch flipped. All the encouragement dried up overnight. My mom, who used to tape my report cards on the fridge, suddenly acted like my dream was a phase I'd grow out of. My older brother Nate, who always got away with everything, called me emo Shakespeare and rolled his eyes anytime I talked about my goals. But it was Aunt Gloria who really let the mask slip. I still remember the dinner when she turned to my parents and said, right in front of me, "Are you really going to let him throw away all that potential?" That line stuck with me. Throw away. Like pursuing a life that didn't fit their expectations was the same thing as self-destruction. After that, everything I did was wrong in their eyes. I didn't get into med school, disgraceful. I moved out at 20 and took a writing job instead of staying under their roof, ungrateful. I skipped one Christmas because I couldn't afford the plane ticket, unforgivable. My absence was more offensive to them than Nate's DUI or my cousin Maddie's tabloid-worthy meltdown at her wedding. because at least they still played the game. I didn't. I think that's what really set them off. I stopped pretending. I stopped nodding along at family dinners and fake laughing at my uncle's racist jokes. I stopped coming around unless I absolutely had to. And the thing is, I was okay with that. I made peace with the distance. What I didn't expect was for them to turn my absence into a storyline, a new role for me in the twisted soap opera they called family, the lost cause, the one who failed, the embarrassment. That brings me to the reunion, the setup, the trap. I hadn't gone to a family reunion in over 5 years. The last one ended with Gloria cornering me and asking if I was still doing that silly writing thing, and Nate filming it while laughing his head off. After that, I was done. But this time they got clever. My younger cousin Ellie texted me about it a month ahead. She was one of the few people in the family I still spoke to, sweet, awkward, and always caught in the middle. "I think you should come this time," she said. "It's different now. I miss you. And I think Grandma really wants to see you." Grandma's health hadn't been great lately, and despite everything, I still loved her. So I caved. I showed up to the reunion at Maplewood Park on a warm Saturday afternoon, keeping my expectations low. Ellie greeted me with a nervous hug. The setup was classic: long folding tables, cheap plastic tablecloths, buffet trays of lukewarm casseroles, and a giant "Welcome Home, Family" banner hanging crookedly between 2 trees. Everyone else, they acted surprised to see me, like I was a ghost they hadn't expected to haunt the party. My mom hugged me like she was trying to win an Oscar, all teary-eyed and breathy, like we were some long-lost reunion special. Nate slapped me on the back a little too hard and said, "Wow, look who decided to show up." I smiled through it. I had prepared myself for snide comments. What I didn't know then, what I only began to suspect halfway through the afternoon, was that they had planned something big. It started with Aunt Gloria making her rounds, louder than usual. She wasn't just talking, she was announcing things. "You know, it's so wonderful that everyone's doing so well. Maddie's new promotion, Nate's business, even Ellie's going for her master's. Just amazing. It's so important to set a good example for the younger ones." She glanced at me with a sharp smile. Some of us could use one. People laughed. Not everyone. A few cousins looked uncomfortable, but the ones who mattered, the inner circle of the family, they laughed. I was used to it. I kept eating my lukewarm mac and cheese. Then Nate pulled out his phone and started filming people. "Family memories," he said. "Gotta get reactions. Genuine reactions." He pointed the camera at me and added, "Especially yours, man. You always had such expressive eyes." That's when the red flags really started flapping. I tried to leave early, but my mom practically begged me to stay. "Just for another hour," she said. "There's going to be a little presentation. It's a surprise. You'll want to see it." And against my better judgment, I stayed. I sat at the picnic table, sipping flat lemonade and watching my relatives buzz around like vultures waiting for something to die. Something was off. The energy shifted. People started whispering. Phones were being pulled out more often. And Aunt Gloria? She stood by the makeshift podium like she was about to accept an award. That's when I realized they weren't just being passive-aggressive. They were planning something performative, something public. I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. But when Gloria tapped the microphone and said, "Before we wrap up today, we wanted to take a moment to recognize someone very special, someone who's taught us all a lesson in choices," I felt my stomach drop. Phones went up. My brother gave me a thumbs up. Ellie looked like she wanted to disappear. Gloria smiled that rehearsed politician smile. Some families have shining stars. Some have cautionary tales. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, still holding my half-empty plastic cup of lemonade, letting the words sink in. Cautionary tale. That was me. That was how they were framing this. Aunt Gloria's voice rang out through the tiny, rusted speakers, bouncing off trees and lawn chairs like a sermon, and I could see people glancing between me and her, smirking or feigning discomfort, but no one stopping her. "No family is perfect," she continued, pretending to pace like she was giving some heartfelt TED Talk. "We all make mistakes. But what matters is how we come together to acknowledge those mistakes, to learn from them. And today, I think it's important, essential, even, to be honest about where we've gone wrong. Where some of us have gone wrong." That's when she pointed at me. Not figuratively. She raised her hand, stretched out one perfectly manicured finger, and pointed. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was restrained, knowing, almost smug. Nate was grinning like an idiot behind his phone camera, catching every moment. A few of my cousins were already filming too, clearly in on whatever this was. My mom sat next to Gloria, nodding sadly like she'd just witnessed a tragic accident. I should have walked away. I should have stood up, turned around, and left that cursed picnic table in the dust. But I didn't. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Or maybe it was the absolute disbelief that they'd go this far. Aunt Gloria clutched a stack of paper dramatically. In the spirit of growth, I took the liberty of compiling something. A little timeline of Rowan's journey. I think it's important to look back, to reflect, and to understand where things derailed. I froze. A timeline? She started reading, her voice syrupy with fake concern. Let's start with 2013. Rowan decides not to apply to any medical schools, despite years of his parents' support and encouragement. Instead, he begins writing short stories. On the internet. Laughter. 2015. Drops out of a reputable internship program because he doesn't feel inspired. Later that year, moves into a studio apartment with no central heating. More laughter. I scanned the crowd. Some people looked amused. Others, uncomfortable. Like they knew this was crossing a line but weren't brave enough to say it. I caught Ellie's eyes. She looked pale, horrified. Her phone stayed in her lap. 2017. Gloria continued, her tone brightening like she was reading a children's book. Rowan skips his sister's engagement party, no explanation. Oh wait, we later found out it was because he had a writing deadline. For a blog post. 2019. Loses job at local publishing firm. Spotted working part-time at a bookstore. Not even management. I wasn't even embarrassed anymore. I was furious. Not at the details, some of those were true, but at the glee in her voice. At the fact that everyone had sat around and planned this. They dug through years of my life like it was material for a roast, except I hadn't agreed to be the punchline. But Gloria wasn't done. She saved the real gut punch for last. And finally, 2021. Rowan stops speaking to most of the family, doesn't return calls, and doesn't even show up for Grandma's 80th birthday. But he did post a tweet about how family isn't about blood, it's about respect. Isn't that right, sweetheart? She turned to me, smiling like she expected applause. And for a moment, everything went dead quiet. The air itself held its breath. My mom was the one who broke the silence. She placed a hand over her chest, her voice trembling, and not in a good way. We tried, Rowan. We all tried. But you've pushed us away. You chose this path. And we just couldn't keep pretending anymore. That's when Nate stepped in front of me, phone camera still rolling. Say something, bro. You're always so articulate. Come on. Defend yourself. The fans are watching. He laughed, and a few others laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because cruelty is contagious. Because in that moment, I wasn't a person anymore. I was a target. A spectacle. A family-sanctioned scapegoat. I should have cracked. I should have broken down or lost my temper. But I didn't. Because as they gawked and sneered and waited for my reaction, something inside me snapped, but not in the way they expected. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. They thought they knew everything. Thought they had every piece of dirt, every misstep, every embarrassing moment. But what they didn't know, what they could never have guessed, was that I had spent the last 2 years learning everything they tried to hide. And I had receipts. Literal ones. Emails. Photos. Court records. Bank transfers. DMs. They had humiliated me for the last time. But I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't even going to explain myself. Instead, I reached into my bag, the same beat-up messenger bag they'd mocked me for bringing, and pulled out a blue folder. Thick. Organized. Tabs sticking out. I could feel Gloria's eyes twitch when she saw it. What's that? She asked, tone suddenly sharp. I didn't answer her. I stood up slowly and walked to the podium. Nate tried to block me for a second, but I looked him in the eye and whispered, "Don't." Something in my voice made him step back. For the first time that day, I felt them shift, just a little, from confidence to confusion. I stood behind the mic. My hands didn't shake. I opened the folder. I wasn't planning to say anything today, I said, voice calm. I thought I'd come, say hi to Grandma, be polite, and leave. But clearly, I underestimated just how desperate some people are to rewrite history. I glanced at Gloria. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. So since we're being honest, let's really be honest. You want a timeline? Fine. I've got one of my own. I pulled out the first sheet. Let's start with 2008. Gloria, you took $6,000 out of Grandma's account for a roof repair that never happened. Here's the bank statement and the contractor's receipt showing zero work was ever scheduled. Dead silence. Gloria stood up. That's ridiculous. I raised a hand. Let me finish. Next page. 2012. Nate, you totaled Dad's car, and Mom told the insurance company I was driving because you were already on probation. I was 17. That lie cost me my license and my first scholarship. Murmurs. Next page. 2016, Maddie's wedding. You remember that, right? You all accused me of skipping out because I was jealous. But I have an email from Maddie herself. Here, where she told her maid of honor she didn't want me there because I'd bring the mood down by being single and pathetic. Gasps. A few phones went down. A few people looked away. Next page. 2019, Gloria again. You convinced Grandma to co-sign on a second mortgage to help Nate with his business. The business went under 3 months later. Grandma's been paying $400 a month ever since. Gloria shouted, "That's not true." But even her voice cracked. She was sweating. Visibly. I paused. Let the silence stretch. 2021. The reason I missed Grandma's birthday wasn't because I was being selfish. It's because I was with her lawyer, helping her review her finances after she told me something wasn't adding up. We spent 4 hours going through every account, every credit card, every withdrawal. You want the receipts? I brought copies. My mom's face was white. Nate was no longer filming. Ellie stood up, no one noticed but me, and started quietly taking her own photos. She was shaking. I looked around. You wanted a show? You wanted to shame me in public? Fine. But you forgot one thing. I'm a writer. And unlike you, I don't bury the truth. I didn't even need to finish. The mood had shifted completely. The air had turned from smug to sick. People were whispering now, not about me, but about them. The golden children. The family royalty. The people who'd built their little empire on lies, favoritism, and manipulation. And I hadn't even gotten to the worst part yet. Because the final document in that folder, the one with the tab labeled estate, that was going to burn everything down. But I wasn't going to read it. Not yet. I closed the folder slowly, looked directly at Aunt Gloria, who looked like she might faint. And just as I opened my mouth to speak again, Grandma stood up. She didn't move fast, but she moved with purpose, each step steady, each breath deliberate. The last time I'd seen her like that was at my high school graduation, before her knees gave out and before her voice started to tremble when she spoke. But today, she looked like someone who had just remembered they had a spine. She walked right up to Aunt Gloria, who was frozen in place, arms crossed so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Grandma didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I trusted you," she said. "And you lied to me." Just 5 words. But they hit harder than anything I'd said. Gloria blinked like she didn't understand English. "Mom, I only ever tried to help. Rowan twisted everything. He's always been." Grandma raised her hand, silencing her like a judge slamming a gavel. "Don't you dare put this on him. I've seen the numbers. I've seen the checks. I know what you did." And with that, she turned and walked back to her seat. The moment didn't end in chaos like I thought it might. There were no dramatic screams or someone flipping over a table. Instead, what followed was worse. The total unraveling of their carefully maintained image, one awkward conversation at a time. Maddie slinked off to the edge of the lawn, fake smiling at anyone who looked her way. Nate disappeared altogether. I didn't even see him leave. And Gloria? She just sat down, stunned, muttering to herself. People avoided eye contact with me. Not out of shame, more like guilt. The kind that hits you when the curtains pulled back and the wizard's just some bitter old relative with an overinflated ego. But here's the thing. Even after all that, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. I didn't eat. I didn't finish my drink. I didn't stay for the cleanup or the awkward apologies. I just packed up my folder, hugged Grandma, who held on to me longer than she ever had before, and left. By the time I got home that night, I felt like I'd been hollowed out and filled with cement. Heavy, stiff, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. That was rock bottom. Not the humiliation, not even the betrayal, but realizing that after all the fighting, all the exposing and truth-telling, I still felt like I had nothing. No peace, no closure, no family. For a while, I drifted. Woke up late, scrolled through old messages, ignored phone calls, most of them from relatives who didn't know what was going on, who wanted to clear the air. Some apologized with phrases like, "I wasn't part of it, but I still feel bad," as if that did anything. Others pretended to reach out for me, when it was clear they were just fishing for gossip. I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't. But I did answer Ellie. She sent me one text the morning after the reunion. That was brave. "I'm sorry for not saying something sooner." I replied, "You don't owe me anything. But thank you." She showed up at my door a few days later with coffee and a slice of peach pie from my favorite bakery, the kind of small, quiet gesture that said everything words couldn't. We didn't talk about the reunion right away. We just sat on the balcony, eating in silence while the sun came up. Eventually, she said, "You know, I always thought I was going to be the one who exploded. I wanted to, but I never could. I didn't have the guts." I shook my head. "You weren't weak. You were just surviving." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "But you lived." That stuck with me. In the days that followed, I started writing again. Not for anyone else, not even for a paycheck. Just for me. It wasn't easy. My fingers hovered over the keys like they'd forgotten what to do. But slowly, the words came back. First in fragments, then in full pages. I didn't write about the reunion. I didn't need to. I wrote about characters who broke and rebuilt. About quiet rage and quieter resilience. About betrayal and found family, and how sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters. And something strange happened. People started noticing. I posted a short story anonymously to a small online magazine I used to read religiously. Just a little piece about a boy at a family dinner who brings the wrong casserole and ends up being the only honest person at the table. I didn't think anyone would care. It went viral. Not millions of views viral, but enough to get shared, reblogged, tweeted. Enough to make me feel seen. The editor reached out personally, asking if I had more. I didn't at the time, but I told her yes. I stayed up 3 nights in a row writing something new. Then something else. Within a month, she offered me a freelance column. I started calling it The Folded Chair, after the one I always got stuck with at reunions. Each piece was a little window into my thoughts, family dynamics, generational trauma, the stories we tell to keep ourselves sane. I never used real names. But the themes? They were personal, raw, honest. The column took off. Slowly, steadily. And so did everything else. A podcast asked to interview me. A book agent slid into my inbox. A local radio station wanted me to guest on a segment about redefining family. I didn't say yes to all of it, but I said yes to enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. Something real. My apartment still had leaky pipes. My kitchen table still wobbled. But I had peace. I had purpose. And I had people who saw me, really saw me, without needing to manipulate, diminish, or redefine me. Even Grandma started calling more. We didn't talk about the fallout. We didn't have to. She just asked what I was working on and told me about the birds nesting outside her window. And I told her about a character I was writing, an old woman who finally takes her garden back from the weeds. One day, she laughed and said, "You always had a way with words. We just didn't know how to hear you." It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. Then came the day I got the letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just a name inside. From Nate. I almost didn't open it. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me read it anyway. It was short. Sloppy handwriting. A little defensive. But also confused. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Everyone's mad at me now. Gloria's not talking to me. Mom won't answer my calls. You burned everything down and just walked away. But part of me thinks you were right too. Part of me wonders if maybe we had it coming. I don't get it. But I'm trying. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer and left it there. Because forgiveness, like healing, takes time. And I wasn't ready. But I was willing. That was the difference. More time passed. More articles published. A small publisher offered to turn my collected essays into a paperback release. I said yes, but only if I could write a new piece, the final chapter. I called it The Disappointment. In it, I wrote about the reunion. Not the facts, not the receipts, or the betrayal, or the folder. But the feeling. The moment you realize the people who raised you don't actually know you. And maybe never did. But I also wrote about rebuilding. About found family. About Ellie and coffee on balconies. About how sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's thriving. And it ended with this. They call me the disappointment. But I've decided that's not a bad thing. Because disappointing people who wanted to keep you small is just another word for becoming yourself. I didn't go to the next reunion, but they sent me an invitation anyway. And this time, tucked inside the envelope, was a photo. A single, empty picnic table. My name written in careful cursive on a folded place card. And beneath it, a note. Reserved just in case. I stared at that photo for a long time. I didn't know if I'd ever sit at that table again. There's something eerie about silence when it comes from people who used to be loud. The calls stopped. The texts, even the passive-aggressive Facebook posts from Aunt Gloria, dried up. For the first time in years, it felt like the entire family just froze. Like a collective inhale they didn't know how to release. I wasn't naive. I knew it wasn't remorse. It was self-preservation. The fallout from the reunion had shaken them in a way they didn't expect. For people who built their identities around control, nothing was scarier than being exposed, especially by someone they considered disposable. But I didn't trust the quiet. I knew them too well, and I was right not to. About a month after my essay collection, The Disappointment, launched, I got a message from an old friend of mine from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Devin, and we used to be close before life took us in different directions. His text was short. Hey, just a heads up. Your brother Nate's been asking around about you. Weird questions. Might be nothing. Thought you should know. That pit in my stomach, the one I thought I'd finally silenced, came roaring back. I called Devin immediately. He picked up fast. Yeah, he said, no small talk. I saw him at a bar. He was talking to some guys we both knew, mutual friends, kind of, but it felt off. He kept asking if anyone knew where you were working now, if you were still writing that family tell-all crap, and whether you'd used any real names. He even asked if you'd ever recorded phone calls. My hand clenched the phone. Did you tell him anything? Of course not, Devin said. I told him to shove it. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the folder still tucked in the corner of my desk, the same one I'd carried to the reunion. I hadn't opened it since that day, but I hadn't thrown it away either. Part of me knew this wasn't over. Not really. You don't hurt people like that. People who rely on appearances more than oxygen, and expect them to walk away quietly. So I got ready. Not with rage. Not with some dramatic, impulsive act of vengeance. I'd learned my lesson there. This time, it had to be precise. It had to be slow. And it had to hurt where it mattered. Their legacy. Their reputations. Their money. It started with Gloria. A few years back, during the tail end of college, I'd interned at a local law office. Nothing glamorous. Mostly filing, transcription, boring stuff. But I remembered something one of the senior attorneys told me once. If you ever want to ruin a person quietly, don't follow their voice. Follow their paperwork. So I started digging. Carefully. Patiently. With no one to answer to but myself, and no timeline except my own. The public record system in our county is a mess. Outdated websites, paywalls, scanned PDFs that look like they were faxed through a potato. But if you know what to look for, you can find a lot. And I did. I pulled Gloria's old property deeds. Her LLC registration for that consulting company she bragged about. I found inconsistencies. Transfers that didn't make sense. Shell companies with addresses that traced back to P.O. boxes. Loans she co-signed with someone named Dale D. A name I recognized as her high school ex-boyfriend who mysteriously showed up in her life again 2 years ago, after a bankruptcy filing. On their own, none of this was illegal. But combined, it painted a very different picture of the respected community leader she played on Facebook. Then there was Nate. I already knew about the DUI. The insurance fraud Mom covered up. But now, with more time and a more methodical eye, I found something better or worse, depending on who you ask. Nate had started a financial coaching business. Let me clarify. Nate, who once thought a Roth IRA was a martial art, was now selling online courses teaching people how to build passive income through real estate. His website was slick. His Instagram was full of staged luxury, leased cars, Airbnb rentals he didn't own, screenshots of bank statements with the names cropped out. It screamed scam. But people were eating it up. Until I started reading the reviews. At least 6 people, real names, real receipts, had posted about getting ghosted after paying for his premium mentorship program. Promised Zoom calls never happened. Course materials were PDF downloads copied from Reddit posts. No refund policy, no customer support, just a Gmail address that bounced half the time. And then I found the smoking gun. A PayPal claim filed by a woman named Teresa who had paid $3,000 for one-on-one coaching. She never heard from him again. Her complaint included screenshots of their conversation, his full name, his phone number, and one damning quote. "Don't worry, my brother's a writer. He taught me how to make stuff look legit." I stared at that line for a long time. He was using me to sell lies. That was when I decided this wouldn't just be about personal revenge anymore. It would be surgical. I didn't go to a lawyer. Not yet. I didn't call a journalist. I didn't post any of it online. Instead, I went to someone better. Ellie. Because while I'd been rebuilding, she'd been watching. Turns out, she'd started recording things after the reunion. Not on purpose, at first, but out of anxiety. She'd been so shaken by how easily our family could rewrite reality that she started documenting everything. Phone calls with Gloria. Voicemails from Nate. Conversations with her parents where they admitted things, ugly things, thinking she'd never use it against them. She sent me a folder labeled, "For you if you ever need it." Inside, gold. One audio file in particular stood out. A conversation between Gloria and Nate, muffled, but clear enough. "Gloria, he humiliated us. If he wants to drag this family through the mud, then fine. Let's give him something real to cry about. Nate, relax. We just need to plan a story. Make it look like he's been stealing ideas, or whatever. Say he's mentally unstable. Isn't that what Mom used to tell people?" Gloria laughs, "Perfect. Let's make him the villain in his own memoir." I stared at my screen. My hands didn't shake, because I finally knew what I was going to do. I spent the next 2 weeks crafting a dossier. Organized. Clean. No embellishments. Just evidence. I called it the rewrite. Because that's what they had always done, tried to rewrite my story. But now, I had the pen. I assembled everything. Gloria's shady business filings, Nate's coaching scam victims, the audio recordings, the timeline of family manipulation, even copies of financial statements they thought I'd never find. But here's the thing about revenge. It only works if you hit them where it really hurts. Gloria loved her local reputation more than anything. She'd built her identity around it. Community awards, fundraising galas, speaking at the Rotary Club. If her closet full of secrets ever got aired publicly, she'd be done. Nate? He worshipped status, clout, followers. His fragile empire depended on the illusion of success. One crack, and the whole thing would collapse. So I crafted 2 packages. One for the IRS. The other for a mid-sized investigative podcast that had a reputation for uncovering small-town corruption. Their host, a woman named Cassidy, had covered scandals like this before. People who weaponized family names to build fake businesses, exploit the vulnerable, and walk away clean. I sent her a sample. Within 48 hours, she replied, "Rowan, I read your materials. I don't say this lightly. This could be huge. I'd like to interview you, on or off the record. Up to you. Let me know." I told her I needed time, because this wasn't just about burning it all down anymore. It was about rebuilding on my terms. The interview was set for 2 weeks out. That gave me time. Time to finish the rewrite. Time to finalize the names, the facts, the documentation. Time to choose what I wanted the world to know and what I wanted to keep for myself. But most importantly, time to make a decision. Whether I was going to press the final button. Whether I was going to turn this quiet rebuild into a reckoning. And as I stared at that RSVP card for the next reunion, the one with the empty picnic table and the folded name card with my name on it, I realized something. They had offered me a seat. But what they didn't know, I was bringing the whole table with me. I didn't respond to the reunion invitation right away. I let it sit on my desk, propped open next to my coffee mug like some kind of ironic souvenir. It stared back at me for days. That empty table with the folded name card, Rowan, written in careful cursive. Maybe they thought it was an olive branch. Or maybe it was bait. But the message was clear. They hadn't forgotten what I did, and they didn't think I'd forgotten either. They were right. But I wasn't coming back to play their game. I was coming to end it. Cassidy, the podcast host, scheduled the interview for the Monday after the reunion. That was intentional on my part. If anything went wrong, if they somehow sniffed out what I was planning, I wanted to make sure the world still heard the story. But if it went right, then the interview would just be the funeral procession after the fire. 2 days before the reunion, I met Cassidy in person. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe downtown. She was sharp, focused, the kind of woman who asked questions that cut through the noise. She brought a small recorder, set it gently on the table, and asked, "You sure you want to do this, Rowan? Once this goes live, there's no turning back." I nodded. They made me a cautionary tale. I think it's time I return the favor. I handed her a flash drive labeled The Rewrite. She smiled, like she already knew how the story would end. The day of the reunion came, and I arrived late on purpose. The picnic setup was the same. Long tables, overcooked food, a cheap banner flapping in the breeze. But this time, the energy was off. Tense. Stiff. People saw me and stopped talking. I felt their eyes on my back as I made my way to the reserved seat at the end of one table. My place card was still there, but someone had flipped it upside down. Subtle. Ellie appeared at my side a few minutes later, slipping into the seat next to me like nothing had happened. She handed me a coffee from my favorite cafe, black, no sugar, exactly how I liked it. "You ready?" she asked. Been ready. And I had. For weeks. Months, really. Ever since the first time they turned my life into a joke. Gloria stood at the head of the picnic area like usual, giving a forced speech about unity and learning from our mistakes. Nate hovered nearby, dressed like a tech bro who lost his crypto portfolio, arms folded, sunglasses on despite the cloudy sky. My mom was quieter than usual, her eyes darting around like she was expecting someone to jump out from the bushes with a subpoena. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. After the speeches and the bad barbecue, the mic was passed around for family updates. Maddie bragged about a trip to Greece. Someone mentioned a new baby. And then, as if reading from a script, Gloria clapped her hands and said, "Rowan? Anything to share?" All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. No folder this time. No stack of papers. Just me and my voice. "I do," I said, stepping toward the center of the lawn. "I've been working on something." Murmurs. "I've been documenting our family's history. Not the version you hear at these reunions, the real version. The one with missing money, buried secrets, and people who were told to stay quiet or go away." A beat of silence. Nate snorted. "Here we go again." I ignored him. "Some of you already know what I'm talking about. Some of you helped. And some of you looked the other way. But the truth has a funny way of catching up. And now," I pulled out my phone. "It's caught up." I tapped the screen. 10 seconds later, every phone in the vicinity buzzed at once. Text messages, emails, notifications, all triggered by a timed release I'd programmed earlier that morning. A link to the rewrite, uploaded to a private blog, mirrored across 3 backup sites, and sent to over a dozen local reporters, including the board of the community center where Gloria served as treasurer. Ellie leaned back in her seat, sipping her coffee like it was just another Sunday. Phones started lighting up. Gloria's first, then Maddie's, then my mom's. One by one, people read, and the color drained from their faces. The documents, the receipts, the audio, all of it, laid bare. "Turn that off," Gloria barked at someone. "It's fake. It's all fabricated." "It's not," Ellie said calmly. "I recorded you myself." Gloria whirled on her. "You little." "Careful," Ellie said, standing. "There's more where that came from." Aunt Gloria tried to regain control. She waved her arms, shouted something about defamation and lawyers, but no one was listening anymore. Because the emails were out. The stolen funds. The fake businesses. The proof that Nate had defrauded clients under his brother's name. Even screenshots of group chats. Yes, I'd seen those too, where they'd laughed about humiliating Rowan and making him cry on camera. Every lie, every secret they'd clung to like armor, was now brittle glass, shattered in front of the whole family. Nate tried to puff up, probably to scare me, but no one was behind him this time. Maddie was backing away. My mom looked like she might faint. And Grandma? Grandma stood. Again, 2 reunions. 2 moments of absolute clarity. "I've seen enough," she said. Her voice was calm but firm, louder than it had any right to be. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. And I won't sit here and let you ruin this family anymore." She turned to Gloria. "I want your keys. To my house. To the account. All of it." Gloria stammered. "You can't. Mom, you don't understand." "I do understand." Finally. Then she turned to Nate. "And you're a disgrace." He scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and stormed off. No one followed. Not even Mom. My mother, who had stayed silent through everything, finally stood up. Not to defend him. Not to scold me. She just looked at me with tired eyes and said, I don't know who I raised. I looked back at her. Neither do I. She sat down again. The reunion ended in record time after that. People gathered their things quietly. Some came up to shake my hand. Some avoided me entirely. A few, including cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, said thank you. Ellie stayed behind to help Grandma pack up. I walked with them to her car. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. The next day, Cassidy's podcast went live. It wasn't just a hit. It exploded. The episode, titled The Rewrite, When Families Go Too Far, climbed to the top of the charts within a week. Listeners were outraged, fascinated, heartbroken. I was flooded with messages from strangers who'd lived through their own family betrayals. People thanked me for speaking up, for surviving, for documenting. Within 2 months, Gloria stepped down from every community board she was part of. Nate's website disappeared. His Instagram went private. A small claims lawsuit was filed against him by one of his clients. Maddie tried to spin it, calling it creative nonfiction, but her boss didn't buy it. She lost her PR job. My mother stopped sending birthday cards. And me? I got a book deal. Not just for the disappointment, but for a second book, The Rewrite in Full. An expose, a memoir, a roadmap for anyone who's ever been told to sit down and smile while the family burns everything behind them. I dedicated it to Ellie. And to Grandma. One last thing. A few months later, I got another letter. This time, from a cousin I barely remembered. A simple note. Thank you. You gave the rest of us permission to stop pretending. That's the thing about truth. Once it's out, it doesn't go back in the box. And me? I'm not the disappointment. I'm the reminder that even when they try to rewrite your story, you can always write the ending yourself. And I just did. I'm Sam, 22, and I just graduated a couple of weeks ago. On paper, it should have been one of the happiest days of my life. You'd think a graduation is about celebrating years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices. For me, it turned into another reminder of where I stand in my family. Spoiler, it's somewhere between afterthought and punchline. My family dynamic has always been lopsided. My parents, especially my mom, have this way of making my older sister, Clara, the center of the universe. Clara is 24, and if you asked my parents, she's practically a saint who can do no wrong. She could walk into the room carrying a bag of rocks, and they'd call her innovative for discovering a new collection. Meanwhile, I've always been the one they compare, criticize, or laugh off. Now, Clara isn't just passively favored. She leans into it. She knows she's the star of the family and plays the role perfectly. Sweet smile for the neighbors, perfect grades. Well, not perfect, but Mom made excuses for any slip, and a talent for twisting every situation in her favor. And my Aunt Muriel? She might as well be Clara's personal cheerleader. The two of them together could cut someone down with a single look and a whisper. Leading up to my graduation, I already had low expectations. I wasn't hoping for balloons, confetti, or even a big family dinner. Honestly, I would have been fine with just a good job and maybe a hug. But my gut told me that wasn't going to happen. Still, I wasn't prepared for how bad it would get. The day itself started normally enough. I got dressed, put on the gown and cap, and tried to focus on the fact that I'd actually made it through. Walking across that stage, hearing my name called, it was supposed to be my moment. And, for a few seconds, it was. But then came the part afterward, where families gather, take pictures, and hand over those little gifts they've been hiding. My classmates were surrounded by proud parents holding flowers, stuffed animals, jewelry boxes, you name it. Everywhere I looked, people were being celebrated. When it was Clara's turn to get her gift, yes, my parents brought something for her to my graduation. My mom pulled out a small velvet box. I don't think anyone was surprised when Clara opened it and revealed a diamond necklace. The kind of necklace you don't just buy on a whim. My mom hugged her tightly and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "You shine the brightest, my love." I just stood there, trying not to let my face give away how I felt. It wasn't just the gift, it was the performance. The words, the hug, the way Clara tilted her head and smiled at me like she knew exactly what she was doing. When it came time for me, my dad handed me a thin, awkwardly wrapped package. I tore it open, and inside was a used cookbook. Some of the pages were literally torn out, and the corners were stained. I didn't even like cooking. Clara was the one who had taken culinary classes for fun years ago. My dad chuckled and said, "Maybe you'll finally be useful around here." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through me. Clara leaned toward Aunt Muriel and whispered something, and Muriel smirked in my direction. That was the moment it clicked for me. It wasn't just neglect. It was intentional. They wanted me to feel small on a day that should have been mine. I tried to swallow it down, to not let them see me crack. I smiled stiffly for the pictures, nodded along when relatives commented about how lucky Clara was, and kept my mouth shut. But inside, something snapped. That night, instead of going back home with my parents, I left. I walked out with my diploma folder under my arm and didn't even bother saying goodbye. I headed straight to my apartment, where the silence felt like a relief compared to the suffocating noise of their voices. For a couple of days, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe walking away would be enough, and they'd just continue their little universe where Clara was the sun and the rest of us were background stars. But no. A few days later, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, my parents, Clara, and Aunt Muriel were all standing there. My dad crossed his arms. My mom looked annoyed rather than concerned, and Clara had that smug expression plastered on her face. My mom was the first to speak. "Sam, what is the meaning of this? Walking out on us like that? Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" When I saw them all crowded outside my apartment, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't just the surprise of them being there. It was the way they carried themselves, like I owed them something. My mom stood at the front, clutching her purse as if she was about to hand down some final judgment. My dad leaned against the doorframe like he owned the place. Clara and Aunt Muriel stood a step behind, whispering to each other, their eyes darting to me with that same mixture of amusement and contempt I'd seen too many times before. I didn't invite them in right away. Honestly, my first instinct was to shut the door and pretend I wasn't home. But I knew that wouldn't stop them. My parents weren't the type to take silence as an answer. They'd just keep pounding on the door until the neighbors started watching. So I stepped aside. "Come in," I said, my voice flat. They walked in like it was still their house, like my small apartment was just another stage for them to perform on. My mom didn't even glance around. No comment on the books stacked near the couch, or the plant I'd managed to keep alive for over a year. She just sat down on the armchair like it had been waiting for her. My dad dropped into the seat across from her, stretching out like he was settling in for a lecture. Clara and Muriel took the couch, shoulder to shoulder, whispering under their breaths. The silence stretched until my mom finally spoke. "Sam, you owe us an explanation. You walked out on us at the graduation. People were asking where you went. And do you know how humiliating it was to say we didn't know? You made us look like fools." I blinked at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're upset because I left? Did it ever cross your mind to ask why?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, like I'd just said something out of order. "This isn't about why. It's about how. You abandoned your family during an important celebration. That's unacceptable." Clara leaned forward, her necklace catching the light. "Honestly, Sam, it did look really bad. People were asking if you were sick or something. You could have at least stayed until the end instead of making it awkward for everyone." I stared at her. "Awkward for who? You were the one being celebrated. You got the necklace, the speeches, the hugs. I got an old cookbook with missing pages. Do you not see the problem here?" That made Aunt Muriel laugh softly, like I'd just told a joke. "Oh, Sam, always so dramatic. It was a thoughtful gift. Your father thought maybe you'd finally take an interest in something practical. Not everything has to be about luxury." I felt heat rising in my chest. Practical? A used cookbook with missing pages is not a practical gift. It was a mockery, and you know it. My dad finally spoke up, his tone clipped. "Watch your tone. We didn't come here to be insulted. You're ungrateful, Sam. Do you have any idea how much we've done for you? A roof over your head, food on the table, clothes. And this is how you repay us, by storming off and sulking like a child." I couldn't help it. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You call that repayment? I worked jobs while in school just to pay for things you wouldn't." Clara got everything handed to her. Every lesson, every trip, every request, granted without hesitation. Me? I had to beg for bus fare some weeks. And now you're here, lecturing me about gratitude? Clara rolled her eyes. "There it is again, the victim act. You always twist things to make it sound like you had it so hard. Mom and Dad did what they could. Maybe if you weren't so average, you'd have earned more attention. But you never stood out. Not like me." Her words landed exactly where she wanted them to. Clara had always been skilled at cutting me down with a smile. She didn't even raise her voice. She didn't have to. She had backup. My mom reached over and patted her hand, nodding in agreement. "That's enough," my mom said firmly, but not to Clara, to me. "We didn't come here to argue. We came to tell you that you embarrassed this family, and we won't tolerate it. We expect you to come to dinner this weekend. You'll sit with us, and you'll apologize. Do you understand?" I stared at her in disbelief. Apologize? For walking out after you humiliated me at my own graduation? Her eyes narrowed. Humiliated? Is that what you call it? A gift is a gift, Sam. It may not have been what you wanted, but we thought it was fitting. Your father was being lighthearted, and you chose to take offense. That's on you. Muriel smirked again, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You should be careful, Sam. Pushing away your family like this, it'll catch up with you. People talk. Do you really want to be seen as the bitter one? I clenched my jaw. I'd rather be bitter than a doormat. The room went quiet after that. My dad leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on mine. You're making a mistake, son. Family is family. You don't walk away over small slights. You come back, you make amends, and you move on. That's how it works. But his voice didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a warning. Like he was reminding me of a rule I wasn't allowed to break. And in that moment, I realized something. They weren't here out of concern. They weren't here because they missed me or because they regretted what they'd done. They were here to pull me back into line, to make sure I played the role they'd written for me. The one where Clara shines, and I stay in the shadows, quietly taking the scraps. I leaned back against the wall, my arms crossed, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm not apologizing, I said finally. The look on my mom's face darkened instantly. Clara's lips curled into a small, triumphant smile, as if she'd been waiting for me to say the wrong thing. My dad shook his head slowly, and Muriel whispered something under her breath that made Clara stifle a laugh. That's when my mom stood up, her voice sharp and controlled. If that's your choice, Sam, then understand this. We won't forget it. You may think you can walk away, but family ties aren't so easily broken. You'll see us again. And when you do, I hope you've come to your senses. And just like that, they started gathering their things. Clara made sure to stand close enough that I caught the glint of the necklace again, tilting her head to whisper to Muriel as they walked out the door. My dad gave me one last look that felt more like a threat than anything else. I spent the next few days in a mix of disbelief and simmering anger. The encounter at my apartment replayed over and over in my head. Every smirk, every whisper, every subtle jab that my family had thrown at me. It all felt like they were deliberately stacking insults, waiting for me to break. The more I thought about it, the more I realized they weren't just insensitive, they were cruel. And not the accidental, thoughtless kind of cruel. The calculated kind, the kind that makes you question if anyone in your family truly cares about you at all. Then came the phone call. My mom's voice, sweet but sharp, filled my apartment, demanding that I join them for a family dinner that weekend. She framed it as a chance to reconnect and smooth over the awkwardness from graduation. I could practically hear the underlying command behind the words. Show up, sit quietly, and accept that Clara would remain the golden child while I played the part of the background character. I almost hung up. Almost. But something inside me, a mix of anger and resolve, told me that this was my opportunity. If I went, I would be stepping into their world, but I wouldn't have to follow their rules. I wouldn't have to be the kid who bends for every little insult. So I said yes. I spent the next couple of days planning. I went over the sequence of events in my head, thinking about how they had humiliated me, and I mapped out exactly how I could turn it back on them, without stooping to shouting matches or emotional outbursts. This wasn't going to be petty. It wasn't going to be obvious. This was going to be precise. The night of the dinner arrived, and I walked into the family house like I owned the place. I had spent the morning buying a few subtle gifts, just small things, almost forgettable, but with a story behind them. I wanted them to see that I wasn't careless, that I wasn't just the shadow of Clara. I had my own achievements, my own thoughtfulness, and I planned to make that obvious without ever saying it outright. From the moment I stepped in, it was clear they thought they had me. My mom's smile was tight, a little too practiced. My dad's posture was rigid, his hands clasped as if preparing for a lecture. Clara greeted me with a brief, polite nod, enough to remind me that she thought she was untouchable. And Aunt Muriel hovered near the kitchen, smirking in that way that made you feel like you were being silently judged with every step. Dinner started with the usual small talk, forced laughter, and subtle comparisons. My mom made a point of praising Clara's latest work project, her volunteer efforts, and her supposedly flawless personal life. Every anecdote was framed to highlight Clara's successes, while leaving me as the unspoken contrast. I listened quietly, picking up the cues, observing the way my family twisted each story and biding my time. I wasn't going to respond immediately. The more they spoke, the more obvious it became. This wasn't about celebrating anyone. It was about control. Every comment, every laugh, every compliment to Clara was designed to remind me that I was less than. When the salad course arrived, I decided it was time to test the waters. I casually brought up a recent project I had been working on, a freelance business I'd started, quietly, over the past year. I explained, without embellishment, that it had begun to take off, and that I'd recently signed a significant client that could potentially turn into a long-term partnership. The room went silent. My mom's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. My dad blinked, trying to mask his surprise. Clara tilted her head, squinting at me as if she hadn't heard correctly. And Aunt Muriel, that smug smirk suddenly faltering, leaned closer to whisper to Clara, "You've been working on this." Muriel said under her breath. "Yes," I said, calmly, letting the words settle in. "For the past year." I didn't say anything because, honestly, I didn't think anyone here would care. But it's been successful. More successful than I expected. My mom's voice, sharp now, cut through the tension. "Sam, we never asked you to do all of this on your own. You could have come to us for guidance." I held her gaze evenly. I didn't need guidance. I needed space to actually accomplish something without being compared to Clara every step of the way. Clara laughed softly, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "Space? You mean being left to flounder while I get all the attention? You make it sound like we deliberately held you back." I didn't reply. Instead, I waited, letting her words hang in the air. The silence was uncomfortable, heavy, and I could feel my family shifting in their seats. They weren't used to being in a room where they didn't have the upper hand. Then came the main course, and my real plan unfolded. I reached for the small gifts I had brought, carefully chosen items that I knew would highlight aspects of my life and accomplishments without seeming boastful. I handed one to my mom first, a book she had mentioned wanting months ago, signed by the author. Her eyebrows shot up, and I could see the faint flush of surprise. Next, I handed one to my dad, a custom notebook with a design he had once admired, along with a set of professional pens. His jaw tightened. Then I turned to Clara and Muriel, giving each a gift that seemed innocuous, a framed photo of one of my freelance projects, a small token that implied recognition for work they didn't understand. The effect was immediate. My mom and dad were caught off guard, clearly recalculating what they thought they knew about me. Clara leaned back, the smirk faltering as she glanced between the gifts. Muriel's whispering turned into a subtle muttering, clearly trying to strategize how to save face. And just when the tension had started to settle, I laid my final card on the table. I calmly mentioned that the client I'd landed was one of the companies my parents had often dismissed as unrealistic or too ambitious for someone like me. The silence was palpable. I could see my dad's hand tighten around the fork. My mom's lips pressed together in disbelief. Clara's eyes widened, and Muriel stopped moving entirely, as if the room had frozen around her. No one said a word for what felt like an eternity. The power dynamic had shifted completely, but it wasn't obvious, at least, not to them. On the surface, we were still having a polite family dinner. But underneath, I could feel the subtle tremor of control slipping from their hands. I had planted the seed, and I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because what they didn't realize was that I hadn't come here to simply defend myself. I had come to make them see, in ways they would understand, that I was no longer the shadow in Clara's light. That I had value, achievements, and a life of my own, and that I could expose how cruel, manipulative, and self-centered they really were. By dessert, I knew they were on edge. My calm, measured tone, the little reveals, the subtle reminders of what I had accomplished without their help, it was eating at them. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, exchanging quick, tense glances. Clara's hands fidgeted around her napkin, and Aunt Muriel was silent for the first time all evening. And then my mom did something that made me realize how far this was going to go. She slammed her hand on the table, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make a statement. Sam, enough games. We are your family. You will not treat us like strangers. Apologize for your attitude, and everything will go back to normal. I leaned back, holding her gaze. Apologize? For what? For finally showing you who I am. For refusing to let you control me and humiliate me like at my graduation? I don't think so. The tension at the dinner table was electric, and I could see the cracks forming in my family's carefully constructed image of control. My parents had always believed that power came from wealth, authority, and the ability to manipulate. But they hadn't counted on one thing: me deciding I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. After Mom's sharp slam of the hand and her command to apologize, I knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to show them the consequences of their behavior. So I waited until dessert had been cleared, and all four of them were sitting back, smugly confident they had me trapped in the evening's social performance. Before we end tonight, I said calmly, there's something I think you all need to see. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sleek, professionally bound portfolio of my work. I laid it on the table and opened it to show a detailed project plan, contracts, and screenshots of the client I'd mentioned earlier. My parents leaned forward, their expressions shifting from control to confusion, then to shock. Clara and Aunt Muriel exchanged a rapid glance, and I could almost hear the gears turning in their minds. This, I continued, is the project I've been managing for the past year. All of it done independently. And here, I flipped to another page, is proof of the income I've generated, enough to support myself completely, without relying on anyone, and without taking any favors from this family, who have consistently prioritized one person while dismissing the other. My dad's lips pressed tightly together, a flicker of anger crossing his eyes, but I ignored it. Mom's cheeks were pale, and Clara's smirk had vanished, replaced with a thin line of frustration. Even Muriel, who had always been the observer, was frozen, caught off guard by the level of preparation I had brought to the table. I didn't stop there. I pulled out another folder. This one contained copies of emails, messages, and subtle records of how my family had manipulated situations over the years. Nothing illegal, nothing extreme, just the accumulation of small insults, dismissals, and favoritism. Here's the reality, I said. All the times you made me feel like I was worthless. All the times you chose Clara's comfort over my dignity. This is what it looks like when someone actually keeps track. And yes, I've kept it, because I wasn't going to allow you to continue treating me like a shadow. This is exactly why I walked out on my graduation. The room fell silent. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Sam, you're being ridiculous. This isn't how families operate. You're exaggerating everything. I'm not exaggerating, I replied steadily. I'm showing you facts. Every overlooked birthday, every forced comparison, every gift meant to humiliate rather than celebrate, it's all here. And now, after seeing what I've built and what I've documented, you understand that I don't need this family's validation or control anymore. I don't need anyone here to approve my success or dictate my worth. Clara's eyes narrowed, but I could see the doubt creeping in. Muriel's smirk had disappeared entirely, replaced by a tense tightness around her mouth. And my parents, well, they were silent, powerless for the first time in years. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and I held all the evidence. Then I closed the portfolios and looked around the table. I have a proposal. From now on, I won't participate in your performances, your comparisons, or your little competitions. I'll be independent. You can continue your favoritism, your whispering, and your judgment, but it won't touch me anymore. If you try to belittle me again, I have everything documented to show exactly what you've done. And believe me, everyone in this family, and beyond, will see it. Mom's face flushed with anger, but I didn't flinch. Dad's jaw was tight, and Clara was visibly rattling, unsure of how to reclaim her sense of superiority. Muriel looked ready to argue, but no words came. I left the dinner with my head held high, and the moment I stepped outside, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't the kid they could humiliate at will. I had reclaimed my dignity, my independence, and my sense of self-worth. In the days that followed, I received a few strained messages from my parents asking if I was really going to be like this forever, but I didn't respond. Clara tried to call, but I let it go to voicemail. Aunt Muriel sent a short note attempting to check in, but the tone made it clear she was still strategizing how to maintain control, and I ignored it. I focused on my life, my work, and my apartment. I no longer felt the need to compete for approval or validation from people who had repeatedly tried to diminish me. And quietly, I knew the ripple effects of that dinner would follow them for a long time. They had underestimated me, assumed I would fold under their manipulation, and now they were left realizing that the person they had tried to control had become untouchable. As for the family dynamic, it changed. I wasn't in their immediate orbit anymore. Clara couldn't get the reaction she wanted. Mom and Dad couldn't control me. And Muriel, well, she stopped smiling quite so confidently around me. The gifts, the insults, the manipulations, they were all powerless now. I had my revenge, but it wasn't about hurting them physically or verbally. It was about exposure, about reclaiming my place in my own life, and about making them face the truth. They were villains, and I no longer needed them. And in the end, I was finally free. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.